Afternoon and welcome to the July 5th regular meeting of council. Happy Canada Day for anybody that wasn't down to the park. Apparently everybody else was down to the park because they somewhat overwhelmed our facilities. But anyways, it was a good Canada Day celebration in the park this year. So the city of Parksville recognizes the people of the Coast Salish Nations and their traditional territory upon which we gather with gratitude. At the consent agenda, do I have minutes of the consent agenda meeting held June 19th, 2023 and approval of the council meeting agenda? Do I have a mover and a seconder for the recommendation that the consent agenda be approved as well as the minutes of the council meeting of June 19, 2023? I have a mover and a seconder for that. So moved by Councillor Beal, seconded by Councillor Wood. Any errors or omissions? All those in favor? Thank you. That is unanimous. Delegations. We have two delegations today, and our first delegation would be the Oceanside Task Force on Homelessness and Island Crisis Care Society. A request for assistance, a presentation by Violet Hayes of the Oceanside Task Force on Homelessness and Island Crisis Care Society, requesting assistance finding land for a temporary tiny home project to support people experiencing homelessness. Ladies, thank you. Welcome. You have 10 minutes for your presentation, and you know how the microphone works, the little speaker button. Yes, if you just direct the microphone towards your, yeah, thank you. And sometimes on that one, you have to just pull your chair up as close as you can.
Okay.
Thank you.
Now it says number one. Is that okay? Okay.
You hit the right one. I can hear you fine.
Okay,
Thank you.
wonderful. Well,
Thank you.
hello, everyone. I do have, as you see, this presentation for you, and I just want to clarify. I am here on behalf of Oceanside Task Force on Homelessness, as is Susanna, and not as Island Crisis Care, just because when I was putting in the thing initially, I wasn't sure, but that's why we're here. So let me see if I can get this to click over. Maybe not. I'll hit enter and see if that works. There we go. So just briefly, we're here today to bring forward a proposal just to investigate what could be done around the homelessness situation in Oceanside. We have come across an innovative solution that we believe might be something that could be used in the area. And so we just wanted to share that with you and see if there was a possibility to look for some land that might be used for that. So a couple of months ago, a few of us went down to Duncan, and we toured the village, which is called a tiny home project. But I must say that when you look at the, what's that, Homes and Gardens on TV, this would not be that. There's no washrooms, there's no kitchens in them. So it really is kind of a shelter space. It's just a room. But it is a concept that is really working down there. They've been running now for 3 years. And so here is kind of what we learned as we went down there to look at what they're doing. So here it is. It's very, very basic, just a bed. They have moved in a little chair, some space there, hydro so that they can stay warm in the winter, lighting, and just basically a very secure space. They can lock their door and have some privacy, but that's really all that there is there in the units. So here's from the outside, here's a picture of the units, and we learned that they cost about $10,000 each, these units, and they were delivered in. Meals are provided on site, but through the office. So they're prepared off site, brought in, and then they just hand them out to the residents there. And then you'll see that picnic area there, which is where they eat their meals, or they can take them to their room if they wish. And the great thing about what they're doing down there, which really encouraged me, is they're 24/7 sites. So they are staffed 24/7 and resources come to the site. So we often hear, you know, how challenging it is. You know, you need things in the downtown because that's where the resources are. But in this situation, it is actually downtown, but this would work outside of town because the resources come. And so they have the mental health, they have the band that comes for the Indigenous supports. They have all sorts of supports coming, and they meet with the people on site, and people are starting to get well. One thing that we learned that was very encouraging was the amount of crime reduction in that area since they opened. And it was quite staggering. I think it was around 18% they were saying that crime had gone down. And people in the community who had been opposed at the beginning and had started a petition actually now have said that, you know, I'm sorry, we were wrong. You know, this is a good thing. So that was very encouraging to hear. In Duncan, they've set it up in pods of 10 to 12 units. So each of those pods is secured with a fence. And then they have this shared washroom facility that you'll see there. So it's one unit, but with 3 rooms with a shower, a sink and a toilet in each one. And yeah, it seems to be working very, very well. So then you only have to bring in the water to those units. So in doing research, we discovered that this is being done across the country, really helping people. And it really is a temporary thing. I mean, it's not long-term because they don't have washroom facilities of their own and they don't have, you know, all that you really need for a home, but it is something that is working to stabilize people. And one thing we really notice at Orca Place is that it's very difficult to bring someone from the street straight into a unit with a kitchen and a washroom to look after. And so I think this could be a great option to stabilize people, have the supports of the 24-hour staff, get them ready for that next step. For some, it might be that they'll be ready to move into their own unit with, you know, maybe a rent support. And for others, it might be that they need the ongoing supports and might be a good fit for Orca. So I really do think it is one of the steps. It's not the answer for everything, but it is a good step. This is one that's in Vancouver that we found online. They're currently trying to get it set up, and it's kind of like duplex ideas. And then this is again in Victoria. And I was very encouraged by this one in Victoria. They actually raised $500,000 a few years ago, I think it was 2021, just from the community. They put it out there and they raised $500,000 to buy the units. And then they've opened up and are being very successful. So the benefits, I might have already said it, but just go through these. So yeah, I've already talked about the staffing, and I do think it is important that it's 24/7 staffing. What the issues that we see in shelters, and we've all seen it, we've operated the shelter here for a few years, and I think we've seen ongoing issues. When you put someone up for the night and then you turn them out in the morning, it's difficult. I mean, where do they go? How do they stay warm in the daytime? This is definitely based on a 24-hour program. And I was encouraged to hear that in Duncan, BC Housing is now funding that completely. They didn't at the beginning, it was through Strengthening Communities, but now they are funding it. So I think that's a good possibility. There again, just having the people together, you can build those supports and have that good neighbor agreement with them so that, you know, there is the expectation of cleanliness and good behavior in the neighborhood. And as I said, you know, stability and community is so important. And I really think that something like this could make a difference. Same kind of thing. And our proposal is, we believe at the task force that we really do need to do something. And I mean, and we've been struggling through the years, as I know everyone has. And so I will say, and this does not need to be Island Crisis Care Society, but we do have the capacity this year to do something. So we would be willing to step forward and do something if it was needed, but there might be other organizations as well. So, you know, whichever would be best for the community. And we are proposing a slightly smaller site than what is in Duncan. In Duncan, they have 34 units. I would propose 20 to 24. You always would want to go 20 because if you want 2 staff, which I believe is important for BC Housing to fund it, you have to have 20. So, you know, if you do less, they'll try and give you 1 staff. So Duncan was 34 units on 0.97 acres. So we would be able to scale back. And our ask is that if the city would agree to see if there's some land that might be a possibility. We are also going to go to Qualicum and ask them as well, and to the regional district. But just to be able to look at all the options and see what is available out there and see if we can do something. And we do believe that it is something that is very important to move on as quickly as possible because the cold is coming and it would be nice to get people in if we can. So there we go. I'm ahead of it again. And yeah, so that's pretty much my presentation. Did I miss something? No? Okay. There we go. So any questions for me or for Susanna? She's sitting there too quietly.
Thank you. And Susanna, I see they've given you the little chair. And it's not to belittle you, but we just wanted you to be comfortable. So I see you. You don't have anything that you're going to add? Okay, that's fine. I didn't want to talk past you. That's great. Thanks very much for showing up, Violet and Susanna. Well done presentation as you usually do. And I appreciate that. Just a couple questions if I have anyways. On the Duncan site anyways, I understand now it's 34 total anyways units and it's BC Housing funded. The ones you point out to Victoria, Caledonia, is that the one by Royal Athletic Park?
I actually don't know. I only found it
Okay.
online.
Is it
so-
still operational now? Okay,
Yes.
because they had some in Royal Athletic Park and it was similar to that. But it was moved, well, when ball season started. So I guess they.
Yeah, I
had to
think
move.
they did move.
Yeah, I
one,
wonder if
definitely.
this is
Yeah.
what they moved over to Caledonia, which isn't far from Royal Athletic Park. I'm familiar with Victoria. So the other question I had in Duncan, so being that they have 34 total units and it's been operational for 3 years now,
Mhm.
does Duncan also have either a cold weather shelter, like an overnight shelter, or do they have other shelter facilities over and above the tiny homes?
They do. They have a full 24-hour warm land. It's run by CMHA.
Right.
So they do have a 24-hour shelter.
So it didn't reduce the need for having a shelter. So they have a shelter and the tiny homes.
Yeah, the shelter's been operational for, I would say at least 12, maybe 15 years.
Right, right.
So, yeah,
Yes, yes.
they
and-
have
and-
a much bigger issue down there for homelessness than we have here,
And
for
that,
sure.
yes, I understand that.
Yeah.
And so this is just pretty well to supplement
Yes.
what they already had with an existing shelter anyways. Slightly different model. Would you think that these people, they would get enough supports from the organization in Duncan that could make it so it's transitory into another level of housing? Like, is there any kind of treatments, like you say full services are supplied 24/7? Is there any counseling? Is there any addiction control or similar to what Forward House is doing
Mhm.
right here in Parksville? Is there any of those services being provided for the individual?
Yeah, so similar to what we do at Orca actually is resources come in. So whether it be an organization like Forward House or someone, I know in Nanaimo, we have a counselor that comes in. Mental health and substance use comes in, as do they here. So yeah, those kind of things, they just all come in and then can support the people. The challenge when people are out on the streets is that finding them.
Right.
So, they move around. And so, someone will make a really good connection. We have an outreach worker, as does the SOS and CMHA. And, you make those connections and then you try to find the person, you can't find them. So that's the beauty of having people together, is that being able to find them, having a space to sit down and talk to them. And then, the next step, they might want to go for treatment and they might want to start looking for permanent housing, any of those things. It's much easier.
Right. And is there a vetting process that you do for your tenants? So your post tenants, you only have 34 units. And so
Down there,
I would suggest that they're in demand. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that they use a vetting process
They
to
do.
make sure that the tenants are suitable. They're
Yeah.
good neighbors to themselves.
yeah. So I think what actually happened down there was the space that they're using was a place where people were camping. Okay, so they actually put people inside. So it was a slightly different process at the beginning. Now they use the coordinated access table, which is the same as we do at Orca to bring the people in.
Right,
So, yeah.
great. And then
And
you-
it is temporary in Duncan because BC Housing bought the land and they intend to put a permanent residence on that property.
interesting. And what form would that be, Violet? Is that like a supportive housing project or is that?
Yeah, I don't know the
or-
details.
Or there's the latest term is complex care complex care housing, something like that?
I don't know any details. I just,
Okay.
the manager, when we were down there, just told us that BC Housing had purchased the land and
Okay.
they were going to do permanent.
That's good. I can check
Yeah.
into that further with the BC housing connections we
Mhm.
have. That's great. Thank you very much. And you also mentioned that the services come to them,
Mhm.
which is good. So you don't have to go looking for them and looking for the services, and it can be located out of town. And you struck a particular good chord with me, of course, is that you're actually presenting also to the town of Qualicum Beach and to the RDN as well. Because our land,
Yeah.
issues aren't great, in Parksville, because we've used up a lot of our land for, well, not only Orchard Place, rightfully so. And so, but also affordable housing projects are, coming in now to come in and taxing our land resources we have. So we appreciate that. I think that's all the questions for now. Thank you very much. Council. Yeah. Councillor Gore, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the delegation from ICCS. First of all, I want to thank ICCS for all the work that you folks do in our community. And I can say it with a lot of confidence that our community is quite pleased with the operations of the Orca Place. My first question to you is, what is the extent of this need in terms of how many people are we looking? I know you mentioned about 24 units, but what's the need? How many people are in the need of such housing? And then you mentioned winter is coming. Even let's say everything falls in place, how confident are you something like this to be operational in such a quick timeline?
Yeah, do you want to answer the thing about the point in time, Kevin?
I'm too short.
You can
Um,
stand if you like.
That's okay. So the last count in 2021 identified 87 homeless individuals, and we know that's an undercount. The April count that took place this year, we won't have the results likely till end of July, early August. It's a provincial count, so the information is released for all communities at the same time. So we don't have that information yet.
And the next part was, I've forgotten. Winter. Oh, now that depends on land availability, of course. I have heard of these projects getting up and going in 3 months. So, yeah, but having said that, it all is based on the land. Because if there has to be rezoning or anything, that can take time. But yeah.
If I can just add into, and you can follow up as well. Of course, that would mean you need service land, because you're going to need a few things. You're going to need water, you're going to need sewer, and you're going to need power.
Yeah, I wonder, and we haven't done any huge investigation yet, but I wonder if there is something that can be done. Definitely need power, but I wonder around if there's something that can be done with a sump pump thing, or I don't know what you call those. Where they hold it.
Yeah, sewage holding
Yes.
tank system pumped into it, but you still have to get water to it.
Right.
Yeah, the water is the essential critical need to, because I understand, and full credit to you for putting kitchen and washroom facilities separate out of the pods itself. So that's.
Yeah, it could be a
it-
challenge.
It gets challenging, when we're providing services. Sorry, Councillor Gore, Darian.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Thank you for answering that. Since it's a large number of individuals and Parksville has so much capacity, that's why the need for a regional approach, like other jurisdictions stepping up as well as Parksville, I think is very important. We have heard about collaboration. I think this is a chance for all the regions in Oceanside to support such initiatives in their respective jurisdictions.
Yeah, I mean, definitely collaboration is huge. I mean, when we think about Orca, it was collaboration between Qualicum, Parksville, and the RDN that brought it together, right? So, yeah, there's possibilities.
That's right. And thank you. And Councillor Beal, did you have your hand up? Oh, yes.
Thank you.
I saw you out of my peripheral vision.
That's very good. Okay. Thank you very much for the presentation. I was actually, in that I was at the beginning, I was hoping you would back up one slide because I hadn't finished reading the wording on that second last slide. So I don't know if that's possible, but it looks like it might be, just in terms of really reading what the ask was. If it backed up one, can you go back now?
I think Amanda's controlling it.
Oh.
No,
Yeah.
it looks like Amanda's doing something.
And so there, if you went, oh, okay, so that's the thing, I just really
Okay.
wanted to,
Do you want me
well,
to
that was
read?
the one before that, actually. Thank you. Okay. So I was just, really
Do you want me to
wanting
read
to
that?
read the reading of the actual request, understanding what that was. So you're hoping that the city could work with the Oceanside Task Force on Homelessness to identify potential land, because that's the
Yes.
first step. Okay, thank you. A question also that I have, you did mention some benefits or potential benefits, and I wonder, are there advantages when it comes to staffing? If one goes with a 24/7 model, or advantages to staffing with this model versus some others, or can you speak to?
Well, yeah,
to
I mean,
that?
definitely it's harder if you have a shelter that's only open for the winter, to find staff to actually come and work for that period of time, knowing that they're going to be laid off is difficult. If you have an ongoing program that's 24/7, it's much easier to find staff.
Go ahead, Councilor Bill.
I was also curious if you knew from your time visiting in Duncan, what the turnover was. So as in, I mean, if it's been running for 3 years, presumably, and perhaps hopefully, the people who are staying there now are not the same individuals who were there 3 years ago, although perhaps there are some, I don't know. Do you have any sort of data, any stats at all about how long people tend to stay? And the other part, if that is, are there a lot of people who just leave? Like, how does that work? How transient
They
is it?
talked very much about it being a community, and that people were very happy to be there, and how they were building their supports, and they had them working similar to what we do at Orca with the, going around doing the clean team around the neighborhood. They said that some people had moved on into permanent housing, and that was a really good step for them. Others obviously had died, and others, they said, had are still there from the beginning, but they're seeing improvements in their life. And when we were there was actually like an elder that came from the nation, and it was really good to see that kind of support and stabilization happening with the people. So, yeah, but so that we don't really have stats, but, they just talked that it was a variety of different things.
I guess my question was, does this end up being a village, albeit very, very positive, and that in fact, we aren't getting additional people off the street if we go with this model. But if there are people moving on, then that's encouraging. It would just
Yeah.
be nice to know.
I mean, no one's going to want to stay in a room with no running water, really, right? I mean, people are going to want to, it's a good encouragement to, get people to move forward, but it is a step up from a tent or from being in a bush somewhere. So, yeah.
Any further questions? Councilor Grant.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you to our delegation. Thank you very much for appearing today and for all the work both your organizations do that I know you're not here for those organizations, but thank you for the work you do. I do have a few questions building on some of the questions that we've heard already. One is maybe you can speak a little bit more to whether this in Parksville would replace the need for a shelter, or would this be in addition to a shelter? I think one thing that we've heard from the community is that there's a belief, I don't know whether it's true or not, that having some of these available services in Parksville then also encourages more people to come to Parksville. So maybe you can speak to that concern out there in the community as well. And then maybe my third question would be more around sort of the anticipated costs to the city of Parksville. So would Parksville be purchasing land, owning land? With, I understand with Orca Place, obviously there's the ongoing cost to the city of Parksville of not getting the taxes from that land that So just maybe some more clarification around some of that so we can understand how that might work.
And a lot of that is above my pay grade. So I don't know anything about the taxes and if BC Housing pays taxes or not, I don't know that. But, and as far as, so would it mean there wouldn't need to be a shelter? Possibly, I don't know. I mean, we have nothing right now. So I would see it as a very positive thing in that it's year round. Like, people are not just homeless in the winter, that they need somewhere year round. And so I really think that then as you get a handle on who these people are and what they need, and we can support them and care for them, that then, you know, there's that improvement in life and health and everything gets better. And so I really believe that this is a good place to start. I mean, it's not the answer, but it is a start. And as far as whether we'd still need a shelter, I don't know. I mean, I honestly don't know, but this would be better than nothing for sure. And this would be better than a shelter because it's 24/7 and it is year round. What was there was another one in there? Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, maybe I should be peppering the questions all at once. And by the way, I did get the chance to read through the package around this program that you're talking about in Duncan, which is a lot of very encouraging signs in there. I did, along with a few other elected officials, have the opportunity to go to Port Alberni to see what they're doing for their sort of tiny home village there as well. And maybe a point of clarification around those two projects is that they both are a response to an encampment. So to try to get people out of an unsafe situation into a safe situation. In Port Alberni, there's a property with a number of trailers that are not that well, I think, not that sort of healthy, is my understanding. So meant to give people an opportunity to have a healthier living situation. So here it seems a little bit different. So maybe, my other question was around, shelter. So you can't maybe address the questions around costs. I think maybe the continuum, maybe you can speak a little bit more about the continuum of services within the area, and how people can move through the stages, building on what Councillor Beal spoke to, which is making sure that we are giving people an opportunity to work their way up through, rather than sort of remaining in one spot as much as possible, right?
Yeah, I mean, definitely that's our goal, is to see people and get well and move forward. But I mean, we are missing so many of the steps that it's challenging, like at Orca. And you've heard me say before that, you know, we get people well, and then there's not the next step for them. So then that means that other people are not getting in because there's nowhere for the next to go. So we need so much, and it's not just here. I mean, it's across our country. There's so much need. So definitely people do want to get well and move on. I mean, and especially when they receive dignity and care and community, it makes such a difference. And so, yeah.
So my other question was around the perception in the community that maybe by having services, we're attracting more challenges to
Yeah.
our community. Maybe you can speak to that from the front lines.
Do you remember the stats from the, how many people were from here in the point in time?
No, I don't off the top of my head, but certainly every count that we have done, every point in time count that the task force has been involved, great majority, and I don't want to quote a number because I'll probably get it wrong, is local people. So it isn't about attracting people to our community because we have a shelter, and certainly having this kind of tiny village community, I don't think that would be the motivator for people to move into town. It's really just looking after the people we already have, and maybe some of these issues that we have in the area with the homeless. Having a gathering point like that where they, as Violet said, can be stabilized would certainly go a long way in improving their circumstances. So yeah, I'm not really buying that whole let's bust them in, because most people don't want to move communities. They want to stay in their own communities. So if the easy answer was let's get a bus and bus them somewhere else, I'm sure that would have been tried already. Doesn't work.
Councillor Martin. No.
Oh, sorry. Tell you. From one week to the next, you forget which button to hit. Anyway, thank you very much, both of you. It's the whole thing that I see with this is it's not, it might be here for a while, but it might not be here forever. We need to catch up in our country. It's not just here. So this is what I like about this, and I appreciate your presentation, Violet, with the soundness of your experience in both of you, because we need someone who knows what's going on and has done it before. Because we're just citizens too, and this is excellent. I'm just hoping that some solution will come, because we have right here. I was on Memorial on my way here, checking out what's going on Memorial, and it's a challenge, and it's not going away. It's not. You must know. I don't know the numbers, but anyway, thank you very much. And don't know if there's any asks there, because you've all the counselors have asked really good questions, but thank you very much.
Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mayor, through yourself to Suzanne and Violet. Thank you very much for your presentation today. Appreciate all the work that both your organizations do in the community. I'm really encouraged when I hear that ICCS might be an operator on this. What I've learned so far in my short 7 months on council is that having a local operator that already has a very good reputation in the community is essential for any of these supportive services that we're going to vote on at this table for myself. When I think of what ICCS does at Orca Place, I don't have emails in my inbox complaining about Orca Place. And I know that it was a controversial thing at the beginning. So when you said that, Duncan had some outcry against it at the beginning, and then it got rolling, and now people are apologizing, it reminds me of Orca Place. And so those are just a couple of things that I find quite encouraging. And also, to Councillor Gren's point, I feel like this might be a stepping stone from tiny homes to Orca Place. And then, even if we could get the next step up of housing in Oceanside, maybe it's through the regional district or whatever it might be, that frees up some of those spots in Orca. And then we have kind of a flow, and we can start to get some metrics as to how successful things are. And I think people want to see that success of people rising through the different layers of housing. So no question here. I just wanted to say thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Bill.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and through to our delegation today. Just a thought, I'm thinking about, as Councillor Martin mentioned, the situation that we have right now down in Memorial Plaza, and we've had this other areas in the city. And as someone, a local businessman who works in the downtown area was saying, he really doesn't object to, somebody laying down, but it's all the mess. It's all the mess, right? And it just seems to me, and perhaps you could speak to that and confirm or otherwise, that having something that's a 24/7, or having something where individuals are able to lock their supplies, then there wouldn't be so much mess going along with them. And also, if I may, just to clarify, I've heard some people refer to this as somehow not being a shelter, but my understanding was, when reading about the Duncan project, that it is a form of shelter, but perhaps you could clarify that as
Yeah.
well.
I think the difference with the word shelter is often, it's just for the night, or it's for 30 days. So that's the difference. This is not for 30 days. People stay until they either want to leave, or they're, ready for the next step. So they have stability. They're not worried about, I'm going to be kicked out tomorrow or whatever. So that's the difference with that. And I think, when we see what's happening in our communities, and we see it in Nanaimo as well, there's encampments, and it's because people want to live in community. Like, we're all that. We're all people who need relationship, right? And so if you're out of sorts, if you're having a bad day, you want to be in community generally, right? You need supports. And so that's the beauty of any of these type of things is to bring the people together. They're not alone. There's always someone there on staff that they can talk to, that they can sit down with and talk about their challenges. And I think that's what we see in the areas where people congregate in public areas, is because they're looking for community. And so this is a great way to stop some of that happening and, you know, help people to move forward.
Thank you. I would just like to say to answer more to Councillor Grenz's question about if you build a place like this, the saying, build it and they will come. And so in clarification of, you know, whether they're local or not, well, our experiences now, we've taken a slightly different approach now with our bylaw compliance officers who taken a very compassionate stance with the unhoused in our area, whether they're at Memorial or whether they're at Jensen Greenway, where they seem to congregate on a regular basis. They actually interview them, and they actually, and one of the very first questions is just trying to establish a rapport. And it's like, hi, what's your name type of thing, Bob, and whatever, where are you from? And they tell us very frankly where they're from. And 85% of the people are from other areas that have shelters that are not satisfactory or not safe for them. And they have found that Parksville has better facilities. Maybe you have better meals. Maybe you serve McDonald's or something like that. I don't know. But they've said that they've come to Parksville because they didn't feel safe in the shelters that they were from. So whether they're from Parksville or whether they're actually coming to Parksville because we have better, it's all about numbers. If you go to a large urban area that have a lot of numbers of homeless, obviously the services aren't going to be as great. And there's going to be more threats of danger because there are predators that look out for these people. And so that's part of where ours are coming from. The people that are in Memorial Plaza right now, they're not from here. They're from other areas, and we know exactly where they're from because they describe where they're from. And you know, the bus theory, it doesn't matter. They're here. However they got here, whether they hitchhiked on a bus or rode their bike, I don't know, but they are here. And so that's what's creating some difficulties with us right now. And so we've ascertained that that's what it was all about, where they came from. And so we're worried with the tiny house project in Duncan. We've checked with the local authorities and so forth, with the police and the local councils as well, to say, you know, what is the incidence? And they have echoed exactly what you've said, is that the tiny house projects themselves in the pods that are in the little fences, there's no difficulties with the individuals in there because they're getting your 24/7 services. They say the problem is what's outside of those fences. And so when I talked to the individuals at the forum we had in Nanaimo, I said, what type of police involvement do you have? They say very few police involvement issues with the people that are actually in, it's the 34 units that they have. They say the problem is having the other people on the outside that are congregating in that area, because maybe it's friends they have in there, maybe it's customers they have in there, or whatever, but they are congregating on the outside. And so they say that they're actually having a problem with the outside area of it.
So, yeah, that's not what we heard.
Yeah.
We definitely heard that they had done statistics on the crime in the area. And I mean, and that's right downtown. I don't know if you know where it is,
Yes,
but
yeah.
right on Trunk and the main highway. So I think there had been issues in that area already. And what they said was that the incidence of the crime in the area had gone down significantly.
Yeah, I wasn't speaking to the incidence of crime and to businesses. I was speaking of people actually being misbehaving toward the individuals that were there, that wanted to get to them, that wanted to visit with them, that wanted
And
to.
they've got
There's a
people
fence.
walking around.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then they have people going around
Right,
checking,
yeah,
right, the
but
stuff.
the people in the tiny homes are not confined to the tiny homes. They can get out and leave anytime.
Mhm.
Okay, that's fine. Just the people where they're coming from. And the only other thing I wanted to mention anyways, we sent you a pilot project called Red House, Blue House.
Mhm.
It's just another project, a pilot project that's being presented to the BC government, BC Housing, and all the other local authorities to provide more of a permanent solution for the unhoused. And including a package to start from the very levels as what you're talking about, like strictly out of the living rough and then moving to different facilities that actually have proper treatments for those individuals. So we are, the local mayors and so forth, Mid-Island anyways, we're working collectively to try and find a problem because we recognize that if Nanaimo's problem overflows, it becomes Parksville's problem, Qualicum's problem, and even down, they go back down to Duncan. So we're trying to come to a permanent solution as well. So we're not asleep at the wheel here. We're trying to look for long-term solutions.
It's
And
great.
we're going to right to the top to see if we can get something because we recognize as well. So any further questions? Thank you very much for your presentation and yeah, it was well done. And
Hope you will consider our request.
yes, thank you.
I don't know which one I hit, but we'll leave it for the next.
Great. Yeah. There's another delegation coming, so we can just leave it on. Our next delegation council we have is McDonald Gray Consultants Incorporated Development regarding a development application of 187 Bagshaw Street. We have a presentation by Nigel Gray of McDonald Gray Consultants regarding the development application at 187 Bagshaw Street. Nigel, you have 10 minutes to make your presentation, as you know. And if you could introduce the gentleman that you have with you, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, for the opportunity to speak to you today. With me today, I have Bill Van Steen, who is the owner of Three Dog Ventures. You may know Bill's projects locally, which would be the apartment building across from the Bayside, which is called the
Bayside Manor.
Right.
Bayside Manor,
Familiar with that?
2019.
Yes.
and the mixed use building across.
Yeah, I was partners with Garwin on the Lombardi project. I was the building entity of it, so the general contractor. And we did the design with Garwin.
That's 100 Lombard?
Yes,
Yes. Okay, thank you. Both lovely projects. I'll commend you right now.
yes. And then,
Yeah.
then over the years on smaller projects, we did Cedar Ridge.
yeah.
With John Kerry, he was my partner there.
Right,
I was the
okay.
financial end. And then Skylark Avenue as well, just off Portfield Street.
Great. Thank you. That background information is helpful. Thank you.
So Bill's a local guy. We're a local firm. We have our local design team here with us as well. So we've got Glenn and Claire from DHK Architects out of Nanaimo. And of course, you all know Kara McDonald and McDonald Gray, who's our project landscape architect as well. So if you have any pointed design questions, you can ask them at the end and I'll have them come up. But I'll keep it really brief. This is a project that's been before council recently in 2021. There are 3 applications in front of council today. It seems a lot more complicated than it is, so I will try to make it simplify the ask here for you. Put the project in context. You can see it dashed there. It's directly south of the Thrifties Plaza along Bagshaw Street. You can say the Jensen Greenway. You all know where it is. You can see that Jensen Avenue terminates and the Greenway comes across. So there will actually be, just speaking to the previous presentation, there will actually be some eyes on that space should this project proceed, which would be a good thing, I believe, for the neighborhood. So in 2021, we currently have a development permit and a development variance permit for this site. The development variance was to facilitate a height increase to meet the OCP goal of having 4-story buildings and increasing the residential capacity of that building as well. Since that time, the world changed significantly. And if you have questions about that, I'll let Bill speak to it when council asks. But this is the previous project. So that site has been preloaded due to geotechnical constraints to create a structural bearing. And I'm a planner, so that may not be the exact correct term for what was done there. This building did include ground level commercial on the entire ground level. The new approach is a little bit different, but you can see the form and character of the proposed development is quite similar. So in this case, we're going all the way up to 53 rental apartments and not market condos in this case. And that will be locked in with CMHC. On the ground floor, we're adding 7 accessible units on the ground level behind the commercial space. That is not currently permitted in the C3 bylaw. The commercial space is oriented, of course, towards the road frontage and the Jensen Greenway. And this is a purpose-built commercial lease space for a local nonprofit. And if we're allowed to talk about it.
Hopefully by the 3rd week of July, it will be let out who our partner on this building is. But in particular, one of the changes from the other project was they needed their space all consolidated rather than in two separate spaces because they operate as a one big entity. So the two-story commercial space, the second level will be their admin area, and then downstairs will be their operating area. So this is a highly accessible as well unit because that's one of their demands. So as far as handicap accessibility and people with mobility constraints. So you'll notice that further into design that everything's been designed to meet or come close to the Rick Hansen Foundation accessibility for their uses.
So the zoning amendment, as I alluded to earlier, is simply to allow that accessible unit combination on the ground floor. Like I said, it's not actually permitted right now in the C3 zone, but if you look at your OCP policies, they do speak to the fact that multifamily is encouraged and accessibility and all those other great things that we're seeing in that vision document. The site-specific regulation, I took this right out of the staff report. I won't bother reading the entire thing. It was in your notes, but essentially 60% of that ground floor may be used for residential use is the ask in the zoning amendment. And that is all we're asking for in the zoning amendment. So that would be specific to this property and included in that C3 zoning. The variance permit, we're calling it a reduction, but it's really just an ask for another increase in the height. So originally the height of 19.82 meters. We're reducing that down to 16 meters, which will actually be 12.5 feet lower than the previous building design. And this is the specific language in the staff report. And again, we're just asking for an increase from 11 to 16 as opposed to the current development variance permit we have for 19.82. The third application is the development permit itself. So this is the form of character review undertaken by staff and the advisory design panel. This has been presented to the advisory design panel and thank you. I don't think I have any more drawings, but thanks. And changes have been made and those are incorporated in the package that you see in your council report today. WYSIWYG, we talked about this a couple times when I've been presenting. This one is what you see is what you get. It's a rezoning coming in concurrently with a development permit and a development variance permit, and Bill intends to build it. He's all over us to get it built, so. This is, the odd case where it all comes in at once, so the council can have some assurance that what you see now is what will be built because there is a permit application attached to it. Did I go quick enough?
Yeah, you've got minutes to spare. So that's great. Maybe we can wait out Bill to see if he'll give us the name of the nonprofit that's coming in instead of waiting 2 weeks. But that's okay. We
I
can
think
wait.
there's some scuttlebutt out there already.
Okay.
I was asked not to.
That's fair enough. We can wait. Just a quick comment. Your presentation is very fresh. You purpose-built nonprofit on the bottom floor for commercial space. Does that take up the entire commercial space in the building? So it's just for one? Okay, because I remember for the original one, we talked about a coffee shop or something like that.
Well,
down
there is actually one CRU space that this society is keeping as a separate entity to have some type of operation in the future. So it's not going to be today, but it could be in under a year that they decide what they want to use it for to help train people through their system to operate within the community and get them into the job market and stuff like that. So
like that. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
So and just one quick note, the reason I decided to go with these accessible units is on the bottom floors due to discussion with this group and also seeing what happened at Dogwood where we had a multitude of seniors come in, people with mobility issues saying, will you rip that fiberglass shower stall out and put an actual shower in rather than a step over tub? Can you add grab handles? Can you all these modifications, which we weren't capable of doing when it was built. So it kind of lingered in my head about something should be done on a ground level where they have the most easy way to move around in their units and get out of the building and access the city from walking distance or with scooters. So that's why we decided to put the accessible ones on the lower floor, just to make it more accessible. As soon as you manage the word elevator far into the hallway, you all start going, oh, it's getting farther away.
Right.
The 4 units around the elevator are the first ones gone to people with issues usually. So we decided let's put them all on the ground level.
Okay, that makes sense totally. The other question I have or comment is the building itself is slated right beside the Jensen Greenway, as you alluded to. On the plans, I walk by it regularly. The hole is getting bigger and bigger after the preload is finally taken away. And I noticed, of course, that there's been some slight, not encroachment, I would say just use of the Parksville right of way. That's actually the Greenway. Is that not correct? And
Yes, we had discussions with the city of Parksville staff to allow us to do that. And we had an agreement in place on the other one, I think Eva knows about, that we were going to replace it and grade it correctly because there is some water issues that come off of that greenway. And then replace it with grasses, and we gave them a tree amenity fee, but trees weren't in the discussion to put back in because trees bring the unnecessary thing around. So that we're replacing with grass, sod, seeding, and rebuilding that whole area.
so you will be, or Kara will probably be responsible for creating some kind of landscaping plan for in between the building and actually the paved section of the pathway?
Yeah, actually what they wanted was just replacement of grass and soils and stuff and keep it simple. And I'm sure Carol will help us assist in the topo for that so that we can get the right slopes and stuff like that. Because there's a few catch basins in there, and Evergreen has a culvert that drains right onto that property.
Right.
So it puts a lot of water out in the water season. That's why you see us digging now. It's a time sensitive property as far as, because of the water that comes down Evergreen. So
My only comment is I'm familiar with the stormwater system going through that. It gets very wet. It gets very swampy in the one corner, and I followed it through. Is there any chance that maybe the rain garden application could be used in here to help alleviate some of that water going through? If it's designed properly, rain gardens, or is that not in the books? Possibility.
I'm gonna put on my landscape architect hat just because I'm sitting here for a second. So that's up to city staff. Could it be
Yes.
done? Yes.
Yes. Oh, okay. I was just wondering because, when I hear grasses, I get a little concerned about that because we went in stage 4 regulations yesterday for water restrictions whereby no lawn watering or grass watering is to be had. So I was thinking of more like a planting of more native species plantings or something like that, that we're not needing irrigation to be maybe more suitable for that area, because otherwise we're just going to have another brown patch. As long as nature keeps on dealing droughts with us as early as they are right now. So I'm just saying it's a consideration. Maybe it's something we can work with staff on it, but it's front and foremost on my mind because Jensen Greenway is a very popular walkway. To beautify it and keep it looking as good as we can, but without having to use more water, would be advantageous, and you have water kind of coming to us. So I'm just saying maybe the two can form a lovely relationship with each other. So get rid of the water and help the plants. That's just my thoughts.
Yeah, I'm trying not to speak out of turn for staff, but certainly to do an engineered rain garden would
Yes.
require the engineering department's lead on that one.
Okay.
But it is possible. for
Right.
sure. To do a grass swale is quite simple.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
Do they accomplish the same thing? It's debatable.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay. Thank you. It's just a comment on looking at that site. Other Councillor Martin?
Thank you both for your presentation. It's looking forward to things happening here. It's been there for a while. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've noticed, and I was really appreciative to see that there's some 3 bedrooms in there, because we've had requests. I've had requests. I'm a new counselor, but I've had requests during the campaign and since. We need more 3 bedrooms. So I'm pleased about that. That's very good. And I'm looking forward to being finished. Thank you very much. There's no questions. Yeah.
Okay. Councillor Gore.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for your presentation. So I understand that the variance of 5 meters, that does give you an extra story than what's allowed in C3. How many additional units would you be able to achieve with this variance? And does this application not include an amenities contribution as well? Since I know it's just a word text that's been changed in the zoning, but you are getting additional units with that variance in height. And my second question is, sorry, I'll come back to the next.
An amenity is not currently proposed for this project. It's difficult to tell how many additional units we get because it's a floor area ratio calculation here and not a specific unit setting in the zoning. We haven't discussed amenity.
It wasn't brought up in the last project either because it did say allow up to 4 stories in that zoning. So it wasn't, it's not a particular rezone, it's just the variance for the height was done to accomplish the site coverage because this site's kind of specific as a bar 2.0 coverage and we're still nowhere near the actual site coverage just because we can't make that work. The two things don't work together, if you know what I mean, the allowable and we do. So
I'll try to be a little bit clearer on that. We're essentially, it's all floor area ratio in the zone. So we're essentially trading commercial retail space for residential. So I'm not sure we're actually doing Bill a favor doing that. I guess that's the cusp of it.
Just another question. Thank you. So you do mention that the north edge of the property, there will be some large trees, mature trees. Would they be planted or are you able to save some of the trees on site?
There are trees planted along the north property line adjacent to Thrifty's Plaza. Yeah, so yes, those are large shade trees and they'll essentially shade Thrifty's Plaza and some of our site. Some of that parking directly adjacent to those trees.
So if I can ask that question again, so they have been planted or are they going to be planted?
going to be planted.
Going to be planted. It's
Thank
just a
you.
big,
Okay,
it's a giant hole right now. And so we have to wait for that underground. It's essentially the whole site's underground parking. So we have to wait for those walls to go in and then put soil back in before we can do that.
Fair enough. I just blanked out here. Any other questions for the delegation? Councilor Wood.
Thank you, Mayor. Through yourself, if I may, to the delegation. You mentioned rentals. They're all long-term rentals and not short-term rentals?
Yeah, they're all long-term rentals.
Okay.
And
thank you.
when you look at the whole building, because this is our third go around in Parksville, we've added lots of stuff to make the tenant stays from storage areas to everybody's assigned an underground parking spot. So we're not going to have people saying, well, we don't want a parking spot and then fight with Thrifties because they went and parked there. There's bike storage, scooter charging stations. There's EV car charging stations up and down with future more parking charging stations available. So we kind of look at it as people are going to move there, want to stay there, walk around Parksville, barely use their car. If they have to go to an errand or an appointment, they jump in their car, but hopefully make it as less car friendly. If you know what I mean, more walk and bike friendly to all the locations.
Go ahead, follow up.
Thank you very much for that. And to make those long-term rentals, more livable for a longer term is an impressive goal. As we see the down payments on, residential properties are huge, and that's a big obstacle for people to overcome. And although, long-term rentals won't be necessarily cheap, it's easier to get into those than it is to find a down payment. So thank you.
Councilor Beal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through to the delegation, thank you very much. And I understand that we do have a report on this. It has a lot of detail, so there may be some additional questions or comments at that time, but I am on the advisory design panel, so I did get a chance to see some of this earlier and to echo Councillor Martin's comments that I too was pleased to see that there are some, 3 bedrooms in there as well as others. It's really a nice mix in there. Despite having heard some other proponents come forward and say, well, it's really very difficult, very, very difficult to have a 3-bedroom place. So it's nice to see that some people can manage that. And finally, having those accessible suites on the ground floor and to avoid the elevators, your comments quite appropriate. I did recall getting an email some time back about apartment buildings that if they've got elevators, they should really have at least 2, because on the day that there's maybe a move in or a move out, nobody can get at the elevator. And if you've got mobility issues, you're absolutely trapped in your place. So that was really very thoughtful, thinking ahead there to do that. So thank you.
Councilor Grens.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through to our delegation. Thank you very much for your presentation today. I'd just like to say that this project checks a lot of boxes for me in terms of course, the accessibility, but also looking at some green infrastructure, EV charging, solar ready. mixed housing opportunities within the units, as has been mentioned. A couple more boxes that would be checked for me that maybe you can speak to is backing up a sec, I also very much appreciate the other two projects that were done by you in the community there. They seem to be they look great, they fit in nicely to the community, and I very much appreciate the way they have fit into the community. So the two additional boxes to check would be, maybe you can speak to how your projects will foster a sense of community and a sort of village feel within them, because there are a number of different folks living in these communities. Are there opportunities for chance encounters and really getting to know your neighbors so that you can have a sense of community and strong ties with the people that you live with?
Well, we have the amenity space, which is a gym, where if people are using the gym at the same time, they'll learn to talk. And in the back, Kara's put in a bit of a community garden with a little coming together area. And then we're also hoping that another amenity space becomes like a bistro coffee shop type place. And people start using that as hey, let's go for a coffee or something like that. We just have to let the foundation kind of get all their funds together and see what they have left at the end. It's a big step for them. So.
Then the second of those would be enhancing the surrounding neighborhood and community. And in this spot in particular, which has been touched on a little bit, the Jensen Greenway, sounds like you're mindful of that. Personally, I'd very much like to see more trees that will mature into great canopy and providing shade cover and cooling in the area. When we have increased concrete, we also want to have the counteracting increased tree canopy to keep the temperatures down. So whatever can be done on that. I'm aware that there are concerns around, cover, but certain types of trees are better than others in terms of creating hiding places versus tree canopy.
So funds were posted for the trees to be replaced there. That's not a choice that we make. Do I personally think as a landscape architect, all of our streets should be fully tree canopied like Memorial Avenue? Yeah. So the money's there, they could be replanted, they could be large shade trees. It's a staff decision.
You've got your work cut out for you. Yeah, okay, thank you. Councillor Beal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And just continuing that topic of trees, as someone who does use the Jensen Greenway frequently, I've been thinking about this quite a bit, and I realize that your property is over on the north side of the Greenway. And for all that, I'm hopeful that eventually, if there are some trees planted along there, it would be on the opposite side of the Greenway, which would, and if they're appropriate trees, eventually they will in fact provide some shade and some shade cover for the apartment building, but also having them on the south side of the Greenway will in fact provide some shade for the afternoon, which is when the sun is most intense when you're going along the Greenway. And I think we need to think a lot about, where we're putting trees to maximize that shade effect. So anyway, I just thought I'd put that out there while we're talking trees. Thank you.
If I may speak to that very briefly, I agree that the trees should be set away from this building for the same reason that you're bringing up, as well as SEPTED principles of passive observation. So we do want those 4 stories to be passively observing that space and monitoring behavior. But we also want the shading effects of the trees within the green. So just throwing that.
Councillor Gore.
Thank you, Mayor. One last question for me, would these rentals be pet friendly? There is a lot of demand in the community, and I've heard from a lot of people not being able to find a place to rent, not just because it's expensive, but also places don't allow pets. And it's come to a point where people are living in their cars, so they can just have their pet with them. Thank you.
So what we did at the Dogwood property, Bayside Manor, we made the bottom floor pet friendly. And of course, they rented out with a lot of elderly ladies with small dogs. My wife is here. We're pet people. So we just have to look at the right approach. So somebody with a big dog like ours doesn't come in there and ruin the person living above you or below you. So yes, we will be entertaining that, because we always have. One of the big things for us is to see how much demand there will be for the accessible and 3-bedroom units, because it does come at a an additional cost to make a handicap accessible unit is, we have to do stuff like structural concrete has to be changed to allow the showers and our
Right.
team has designed all that. So the dogs will be on the table, but we'll just have to see the demand. Because we are landlords in the past, not presently. But it also has a broad share of issues with people who decide the indoor and outdoor the same spot for their animal. And so as an owner, you have to consider that too. So it's almost like on a per interview basis, like you interview the owners and the dog. We had good success at Dogwood with that, by interviewing both.
I like that. That's great. Dogs are on the table.
Like I said, we're trying to make it something for everybody. So,
Okay.
the person that can't work out, they can still get on their scooter and go to Thrifties. And, it's kind of the downtown core area there, adding on to all those stores for people to use those stores and keep them viable as well.
Looking forward to it. Is that all the questions, council? And then just quick question, building step level 3 or 4?
It's step code 3 as
Okay.
demanded by CHMC.
Yeah.
But there's stuff that actually kind of put it over the top. The architects have designed it with a outbound insulation, which is usually the biggest heat loss area in your building.
Right.
So DHK has designed it to have that. We have many things that would be incorporated into step code 4, but we're not quite there. We're very close to it though.
And what is your utility source? What is your heating source?
There's going to be a baseboard with an Innova 2.0 air conditioning heating unit. And then there'll be ERVs to help with the energy model recovery.
Okay. Thank you, sir. That's great. Thank you very much for your presentation. Well done. You answered all the questions and great. I'm looking forward to the project.
Thank you.
Very much. Thank you. Thanks, Nigel. Okay, council, we have reports from Mr. Russell, Director of Community Planning and Building. Could you please give us the background on the issue regarding consideration of a development variance permit, development permit and zoning and development bylaw amendment application at 187 Bagshaw Street? To consider proceeding with a notice for a development variance permit and to consider a development permit and zoning and development bylaw amendment. Mr. Russell.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. A lot of details being provided by the delegation, so I'm not going to go into too much detail, but essentially we have 3 applications before council. At this time, we're seeking to go ahead with notice for the development variance permit. Later on the agenda, we have the zoning bylaw for consideration of first reading. At a future date, we will be coming back with a follow-up report as a result of the variance. With that follow-up report, we will be asking for council to consider the DP, and the rezoning process will just kind of go along till that process is resolved. Any further questions, I'd be happy to answer them. The recommendations are per the agenda.
Thank you. As you say, the report from the delegation should be fairly fresh in our mind. Council, any questions for Mr. Russell? Councilor Gordon.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a point of clarification. I read it 187 Bagshaw and 193 Bagshaw. Are these 2 lots on this?
If I may, Mayor, through to Councilor Gore, they used to be 2 lots. They were consolidated as part of the last development permit application.
You good with that, Councilor Gore? Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Russell? Seeing none. I'll look for a mover and a second for the recommendation that point 1, that the report from the Director of Community Planning and Building dated June 28th, 2023, entitled Consideration of Proceeding with Notice for a Development Variance Permit, consideration of a development permit and a zoning and development bylaw amendment to facilitate a mixed commercial multi-use residential building at 187 Bagshaw, files 3090-PVP 061. 3060 PDP 140 and 3360-PZN 048 be received. Point 2, that staff provide the required notice of council's intent to consider issuance of development variance permit number 23-PVP 061 to the owner of 187 Bagshaw Street to facilitate a 4-story mixed commercial multi-unit residential building. Point 3, the council, in accordance with the bylaw section of the council agenda, introduce the proposed zoning and development amendment bylaw 2023 number 200.146 for consideration of first reading. Point 4, that prior to second reading of zoning and development amendment bylaw 2023 number 200.146, the applicant or owner of 187 Bagshaw Street provide an opportunity for public engagement, such as a developer-hosted public open house, and provide comments received to the Community Planning and Building Department for subsequent consideration of council. Point 5, that council defer consideration of development permit number 23-PDP 140 until final consideration of development variance permit number 23-PVP 061. I have a mover and seconder for those recommendations, moved by Councillor Wood, seconded by Councillor Beal. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? That carries unanimous. Thank you, Mr. Russell. Don't go away. Mr. Russell, could you please give us a background on the issue regarding a follow-up report for the zoning and development bylaw amendment application of 1170 Resort Drive for further consideration of a zoning and development bylaw amendment? Mr. Russell.
Mayor O'Brien and council, this is a follow-up report for 1170 Resort Drive. Since this application was last before council, the applicant has hosted a developer-hosted open house. As a result of that, comments were received, which have been collected and are attached to the report. Basically, there was 8 comments that were received. 8 members of the public attended the open house. 7 written comments were received on the sign-in sheets, as well as 2 emails were forwarded to the city with respect to this application. At this time, we are 2 things. Later on the agenda, the bylaw is for consideration of second reading, and we're also seeking to advance this application to the public hearing, so we can complete the statutory public input process, and the recommendations are per the agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Russell. Any questions? Mr. Russell, Councillor Gordon.
Thank you, Mayor. So, Mr. Russell, I see that there is a request for a 14-meter height variance in this application. So why is there not a variance application with it?
I believe I believe it's in the zone. Let me just, I believe they've asked for a site-specific provision in their zone. Let me just take a look at their zone. Yeah, so it's in the zone. If you were to look on page 179 of the agenda in section 1A of the zone, there's a site-specific provision to allow for 14 meters of height.
Follow up, or are you good? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. So this is a rezoning application for one part of the property, and there's another property to the north of it, which will have a development permit application come before the council as one whole project, correct?
So this application's for 2 out of 3 parts of the property. The main portion and the portion that they've shown the illustrations on is the part that's between Resort Drive and Island Highway East. And that's what they've shown an illustration of what, it's really a proof of concept. It's not, what actually might, be applied for may look a little bit different than that. With respect to the northern portion, nothing specific has been indicated to date. It would be, other than maybe an information booth, it's a fairly small piece of land, so it may have some difficulties.
Because my understanding is the proposal is to, in that part of the property, the proposal is for about 100 more tourist accommodation units. Anyways, my question goes to the rezoning again back. This rezoning is going to increase the property value about 5 times. And what we as city are getting is $38,000 for the 38 units, $1,000 a door. Plus total offsite works. The total is about $200,000 is what we are getting. So I am personally not very pleased with the contributions that's being proposed. Can you speak to that a little bit? And I have a couple other questions. Thank you.
So amenity, I mean, obviously, you know, the staff level, we identify, you know, the fire department, for example, identifies the impact that development has on the city and its services, as well as our engineering department identifies, you know, offsite demands and beyond anything that's beyond the frontage of the property is considered an amenity as far as servicing goes. In this case, they're proposing a sidewalk, for example, and a with a statutory right of way. That's a draft that's attached to the report. So that's part of their amenity package. At the end of the day, from a planning perspective, really the amenity contribution is really a council consideration. It's not something the planning department, you know, has a tip and balance scale that we weigh. We just present what is being put forward by the applicant. In this case, we have a property that half of it has this zoning already. This half has a kind of a holding pattern zone, an agricultural zone in an area that it doesn't make a lot of sense for it to have that. It certainly has been, like I said, it's in an area where there's been like Scotch broom and gorse and other sorts of things for years. So at the end of the day, I'm not the judge of the amenities. That's something council as a body will need to decide. At this stage, you know, we're really a little bit further along where we're looking to take it to the public hearing. So, you know, typically this is sort of the last report before it goes to public hearing, unless directed otherwise.
Are you good? Okay, Councillor Bill.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through to the Director of Planning, and actually a little bit beyond into the audience. Seeing as how the agent for the applicant is in the audience, I believe. Going back to amenities, I'm very pleased to see the extension of the sidewalk along 19A. I would actually also hope that it would be possible at the time, when the time comes, to actually put in a bench at that bus stop as well. I'm not sure that the faded white plastic lawn chair that sits out there right now is, you know, it's the right look for the spot. And I do see people waiting at that bus stop, and I do see people who are getting off across the street and waiting until it's clear to go across, so I think that they might be working at one of the resorts. Anyway, I put that out there because I do note that there is a bus stop at that corner. Thank you.
Any further questions for Mr. Russell? Go ahead, Councillor Gordon.
Thank you, Mayor. I like the proposal talking about a tree line buffer along 19A and along the periphery of this proposal. But I was looking at the OCP guidelines of tree retention from about 30 meters from 19A. I think the most that's being proposed is about 20 meters. So can you speak to that? Like it's I think is not being supported in the OCP having that extra 10 meters tree buffer.
If I may, Mayor, through to Councillor Gore. So the guidelines were kind of designed for where, you know, Tinamara is, in areas that were sort of fully forested and fairly large land holdings. And when it came to properties that were completely void of trees, it was, you know, one of the things that was looked at is what's reasonable given the state of the property. So it's a guideline. Council has flexibility with that guideline when it comes to the development permit application to decide what's acceptable to council when it makes that decision on the development permit. And council certainly at that time can decide whether or not what's proposed with respect to the buffer satisfies the guidelines sufficiently for council or not, whatever the case may be. But the guideline is intended to, as I said, to retain trees, but it's also intended to kind of, it's not a bylaw setback where it's a cast in stone number. It's designed to be flexible, to recognize that each site is a little bit unique and a little bit different, and there might be other constraints.
Thank you. So slightly separate question, but I remember asking this question to the applicant at the time about staff housing. So I kind of look back into our OCP again, and the resort lands policies actually does talk about providing staff housing. So I would really like to see some of that, whether in the future when this is brought forth before council again for the DP or the further stages, I would really like to see the option of staff housing being proposed.
Any further questions? Thank you, Mr. Russell. Do I have a mover and seconder for the recommendation that point one, that the report from the Director of Community Planning and Building dated June 26, 2023, entitled Follow-up Report, Consideration of an Application for a Zoning and Development Bylaw Amendment at 1170 Resort Drive, file number 3360-PZN045 be received. Point two, that comments collected by the applicant in response to the applicant's public information package dated March 13th, 2023 be received for information and considered. Three, that council, in accordance with the bylaw section of the council agenda, introduce the proposed zoning and development amendment bylaw 2023 number 200.144 for consideration of second reading and the setting of a public hearing date. Have a mover and seconder, please. Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Wood. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? That carries unanimous. Thank you. Report number three, Mr. Russell, Director of Community Planning. Could you please give us a background on the issue regarding consideration of a development permit at 1020 Herring Gull Way for consideration issuance of a development permit? Mr. Russell.
Certainly, Mayor and Council. For consideration is a development permit that will expand an existing mini storage facility. It will allow for the construction of 2 additional buildings, as well as landscaping improvements. And in this case, it's in 2 development permit areas. So it's in the industrial park development permit area and the groundwater protection development permit area. The building's being designed by an architect. There's also been a hydrological study done that's reviewed the proposal and made recommendations, and those form part of the permit. That's for council consideration in accordance with the recommendations in the agenda. There are a number of sustainable features that have been incorporated into the landscaping, which in my opinion for a mini storage is actually pretty impressive, to be honest. But anyways, recommendations are per the agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Russell. Any questions for Mr. Russell at this time? Councillor Martin.
Jeez. Technology. Anyway, I drove by and I thought this particular situation would make a big improvement to the area. And I agree with your landscaping. And I'm sure it'll be drought friendly or something like that, because it's very dry there. That's what I noticed, but we certainly need it. So I think it's very good. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Any further questions, council? Seeing none, could I have a mover and seconder for the recommendation? Number one, that the report from the Director of Community Planning and Building dated June 27, 2023, entitled Consideration of a Development Permit at 1020 Herring Gull Way to facilitate further development of a storage facility, file 3060 PDP 137 be received. Point two, that development permit number 23 PDP 137 be issued to the owner of 1020 Herring Gull Way to facilitate 2 additional storage buildings, landscaping and parking improvements. Have a mover or seconder. Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Grenz. Any discussion? Seeing none, I call the question. All those in favor? That carries unanimous. Thank you. That's it, Mr. Russell, thank you. Mr. Giddens, Manager of Special Projects. There you are. Mr. Giddens, Manager of Special Projects, could you please give us the background on the issue regarding Parksville Community Park washroom and accessibility improvements contract award? To award a contract for the construction of a new washroom building and other accessibility improvements in Parksville Community Park. Mr. Giddens.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And good afternoon, council. The report before you is regarding the washroom and accessibility improvement project in Parksville Community Park and funding options for moving forward. Staff is seeking council's approval to award and contract for the construction of a new Parksville Community Park washroom building and other accessibility improvements in the amount of $1,449,784 plus GST to Milestone Equipment Contracting Incorporated. The project includes a high-capacity accessible washroom facility and new accessible pedestrian pathways that connect the largest vehicle parking area in the park, the core amenities like the playground, gathering plaza, and existing washroom building, beachfront walkway, volleyball courts, and racket courts. The project also includes a new vehicle drop-off area, raised crosswalks, small group gathering areas, 2 outdoor showers, a drinking water fountain, landscaping, and shade umbrellas. The project is an amalgamation of approved projects that were combined to expand opportunities in extending safety, accessibility, and connectivity in the park. The project has been designed and publicly tendered, and the city received 3 bids. The lowest tender amount is above the approved budget, and staff has identified additional funding options for the washroom and accessibility improvements project for council's consideration. Before I present the funding options, I'm going to provide a background on the project, specifically on the existing washroom buildings. The project is in response to items within the 2013 Community Park Master Plan, which identified key issues with washroom capacity being at the top of the list, as well as the lack of pedestrian connectivity and increasing demand and competition for parks facilities. Within the Park Master Plan, the action plan identified 7.3, which was create a more accessible park for everyone. And within 7.3, 7.33 was the internal connectivity with goals to improve and strengthen connection through the park for cyclists, pedestrians, and drivers. Specific actions within 7.33 were number 22, paint crosswalks at intersections and high-use areas, such as around food trucks. And number 25, construct a multi-use path from the gravel parking lot along the beach volleyball area to the gathering plaza, which is a key component of this project. Also included in the action plan was 7.34, universally designed infrastructure, and with the goal to incorporate universal design into the community park to ensure access for all. And 7.44, washrooms. Goal was to upgrade existing washroom facilities, which was partially completed in 2015 with the changes that occurred at the existing washroom. And the second goal was to provide additional washrooms for visitors in the community park, which hasn't been completed. Currently, there are 2 washroom facilities in the park. The first is the Kin Hut, which an exact date of construction is not clear, but it seems to be in the 1960s. And it was once part of another facility that it was part of, and then the facility has been removed due to its condition. The Kin Hut was originally designed to support the facility, but not as a core washroom facility. The Kin Hut female washroom has 2 stalls, 1 sink, and the male's washroom has 1 stall, 1 urinal, and 1 sink. None of the fixtures are modern with touchless automation. The Kin Hut has had many upgrades over the years to maintain its usefulness. However, it is reaching the end of its life. The Kin Hut is not accessible and does not meet base level accessibility requirements for modern public washrooms. The second washroom on the right of the image is the existing washroom beside the playground, which was constructed in 1994. At the time, it included a food concession. Following the park master plan in 2013, When capacity for washrooms was identified as an issue, the building was renovated to remove the concession and was increased by 2 individual single-user washrooms. This washroom facility is an improvement to accessibility in comparison to Kin Hut, but still does not have automatic doors. This washroom is also beyond capacity and is undersized for the estimated 1.5 million visits Community Park experiences annually. Replacement of the Kin Hut has been discussed for many years. In 2020, $500,000 was allocated for its replacement prior to a fulsome feasibility and design process. After staff investigated the opportunity to replace the Kin Hut, it was determined the best course of action was to keep Kin Hut until a new higher capacity washroom facility was constructed at a better suited location in the park. Kin Hut and another preliminary location were eliminated as suitable sites for construction due to the archaeological sensitive lands in the park. Staff looked at all the variables, including circulation, connectivity, planned projects, and available sites that will increase access to washrooms for all users, and decided on a new location now part of this project. In this image, I'll just highlight some of those considerations. That area there is the Gathering Plaza. This is the approved area for the safety and connectivity to the volleyball area. This was also an approved project for vehicle drop-off, circulation, and safety. And we also wanted to address the access from the large parking lot through this area that was identified in the plan. On top of that, with the recent construction of the theater during major events, we're seeing a considerable amount of pedestrian traffic moving through the park on this direction. And so after looking at available lands and where washroom buildings should be placed, either beside parking or playgrounds, the square represents the location that was determined for the new washroom building. So in reflection, we're connecting 2 projects here, the Gathering Plaza on your left and the long linear project that is before you today for consideration, which is a washroom building plus accessibility for pedestrians, as well as circulation for not for vehicle traffic, but people arriving in vehicles to the park and moving through the park to access all the different amenities. As you can also see with this linear trail moving, I guess, east to west through the park, there's opportunities with the 2 new proposed crosswalks to cross the circular inner road to connect down through into the tennis court and towards the theater as well. So this project would definitely connect the park much better with this trail system. This is again an overview of the area. This is the Gathering Plaza overlaid with a ortho photo of the site. And then on top of that, we added the project before you now, which was an extension of the Gathering Plaza all the way through to the parking lot. As you can see, it's a modest design. There's not a lot to it. It's a washroom with a connective pathways, crosswalks, raised crosswalks on the south, connecting pathways into the core of the park, a landing and safety buffer for the connectivity to the volleyball players. The design of the washroom is again modest. The top image is a brick building, metal roof, male and female washrooms. The female washrooms have 5 stalls, two sinks, and the male washroom has 2 stalls, 2 urinals, and 2 sinks. Within this building, there's a mechanical room and a facility storage room for cleaning supplies, paper products, garbage, etc. This is an overview of the project area, showing you a little bit more detail of some landscaped areas as well. And above the washroom building, you can see where the outdoor showers are located. Again, to attempt to try to keep the budget aligned with the project scope, the connective pathways between the hardscape high use areas are actually gravel pathways, and there are no park furniture within the scope of work, trying to reduce the scope altogether. Looking to add those things in the future for the project. Now, the financial impact, the 3 budgets were combined in one tender as an opportunity to achieve economies of scale in the accessibility, safety, and connectivity improvements around the new and existing amenities as set out in the original individual projects. The original project budgets did not include the continuing significant increases in construction costs and inflation. Tender prices are higher than expected also because of the washroom site relocation, which included underground infrastructure as well as requirements for the development permit, which made the building be built 1.45 meters above existing grade. So to make all this area accessible, an extensive amount of fill will be added to the area. And addition of 2 additional raised crosswalks, which was really critical to the connectivity down through the park, and will also slow down vehicle traffic, but also create strong pedestrian movement south into the park. So those were not real core considerations when the original budget was set out for replacement of Kin Hut, and as well as extending these accessible components that are critical for the park. So the 3 projects you can see on your left, the core budget total was originally 957,000. And as you move along, you can see the tender breakdown for each component. The washroom broke down to 800,000, and the 2 combined pedestrian accessibility components were valued at 650,000 within the tender for a total of $1.45 million. And the additional funding required for each component is listed there with a shortfall of $600,000. So the options going forward right now for this project are, the first is to not award this because of the lack of fundings, which would mean canceling the project, canceling the tender, and terminating the project. The city Parksville would not achieve the priority of increasing washroom services and not increasing the access and connectivity as identified in the master plan. The washroom capacity will remain as an issue in the park, and the dependence on porta potties in the summer will continue. Pedestrian disconnect will be created beyond the Gathering Plaza across Sandcastle Drive to the large gravel parking lot. There'll be a disconnect there. Already allocated gas tax or Canada community building funding will not be spent. They will have to be readdressed. And there'll be a continued risk of construction costs increases. And as on top of that, staff would require time to analyze the implications and alternate directions provided by council. The second option is to cancel the tender, and allocate $150,000 of the current site improvement or the Gas Tax Canada Community Building Funding to increase the Gathering Plaza project that is currently underway to safely contain the volleyball activities. So extending that pedestrian connectivity safely within the project that's active, that's what the extra $150,000 would do. However, we wouldn't achieve all the other aspects of this project. So the city would not achieve the washroom component, increasing services for washroom services, increasing access and connectivity as identified in the master plan. The allocated monies from the Canada Building Fund would not be spent. And again, risk of construction costs increase. Staff would also need more time. The final option is award the contract to Milestone Equipment Contracting as the tendered amount, and increase the washroom and accessibility budget by $600,000 to complete the deliverables in 2023, funded by an increase of the Growing Communities Fund reserve and relocation of surplus funding. No increase in property taxes is required for this option. Any remaining funds from the $700,000 in the 2023 Parksville Community Park Works Adjacent Contingency Fund would be transferred to the capital reserves. The washroom and accessibility project would be completed this fall, and there would be a large reduction in dependency on porta potties moving forward. So the recommendations are as follows for this report: that the report from the manager of special projects dated June 26, 2023, entitled Parksville Community Park Washroom and Accessibility Improvements Contract Award be received. Number 2, that the 2027 financial plan be amended to increase the project cost by 600,000 and include an allocation of Growing Communities Fund reserve to the washroom and accessibility improvements project in the amount of 600,000. That number three, that any remaining funds of the 700,000 in the 2023 Parksville Community Park Works adjacency contingency budget be transferred to capital reserves. Number four, that the staff be authorized to award the contract for the Parksville Community Park Washroom and Accessibility Improvements Project in the amount of $1,449,784 plus GST. And number five, that the mayor and corporate officer be authorized to execute the subject contract on behalf of the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Giddon. I guess right up front, I have to applaud your flexibility in moving on the run to identify that the original proposal might not be as effective as what you've actually come up with now, and to provide a brand new washroom. This last weekend certainly clarified the need for a proper washroom facility, which I think you've got going here with your new design. I have a couple questions regarding that new facility. The accessibility features on the new building, if you could, is beside, let's just call it beside the skateboard park.
Yep.
That new one. What are the accessibility features that are going to be included in that?
So with this washroom building, we assessed what's available in the park already. So the existing washroom building has 3 individual use, so single occupancy washrooms already, which is suffice for the park. So for the single use occupancy, single locked rooms. So we've also had challenges with those locked rooms. So we didn't want to expand. We didn't need us to expand on single occupancy rooms for this washroom. But what we did need is capacity. These washrooms do meet all ADA standards for accessibility, which means all fixtures meet ADA standards. There are both in each washroom. One of the stalls meets ADA standards. All new touchless stainless steel amenities inside the washroom. All handles will meet ADA standards. So it's meeting all the ADA standards for accessibility, and all grades move, between this area are accessible grades. So access is no problem to this washroom building. And again, automatic doors are part of this as well.
I was just going to ask if the door openers were
Yeah.
included in this one as well.
Yeah.
The accessibility fix. You mentioned the Kin Hut. Is there any intention of decommissioning the Kin Hut, or because as we looked at it before, it's a workhorse. It's not pretty, but it's got good bones. And so the thing is that if it needed some upgrades, it's actually survived an awful lot of abuse that the newer washrooms didn't survive. So I'm suggesting, I hope, and I'll let you answer the question before I go any further. Is the Kin Hut going to be decommissioned?
At this point, there's been no discussion. As you stated, it's still working. There are opportunities to increase accessibility to this. Base level things like making sure the pathways connect to the hut. Simple things that can be addressed. And I think moving forward, because of its location, it'd be viable to restore it in a modern way. You might have to take it down to the bones to rebuild it, but I think the location and how it services that area of the park is rather critical. And there has been no discussion of decommissioning it at this point.
Yes, and thank you for that, Mr. Giddon, because I certainly appreciate the fact that all the infrastructure is there. You've got everything, so you could actually convert that washroom over to, as we call the stainless steel fixtures, the vandal-proof fixtures as well. They have the same rough ends as the existing ones that are in there, and it would just make the fixtures new and make it actually probably low flush, so more water conservation as well. And I think that would, let it stagger on for a few more years and provide a very valuable need for those people playing baseball that can't make it all the way to the skateboard park. So I think it's a great decision to keep that going, and I'm glad to hear that. And that's about it for questions for myself. Any other questions from council? Councillor Gore.
Thank you, Mayor. To Mr. Giddon, since there is a significant change now in the scope of work and also the costs, would it typically go to retender? Or I know you're asking for the same applicant to be awarded this. And my second question is, since you mentioned about the archaeological significance of the site and now you have to move sites, since the park being so much utilized and we already have plans to do the upgrades and maximize our usage of the park, do we already not know where the archaeological sensitive sites are located?
Thank you, through the mayor. First off, the tender for this component was not awarded directly to Milestone. I know that they're doing the gathering plaza as well, but it was tendered separately, and Milestone was the lowest bidder on the project. So the three tender bids that we did receive were all very close, which is a good sign that we got actually somewhat market value for what we were asking. They were all within $50,000, which is very rare for getting three quotes from reputable and good bids. But we wouldn't have to retender it at this point. It's been tendered properly through a public process. It's just that the budget that we have is not suffice at this point. So it's up to us if we want to meet that. And as far as archaeological site in the park, yeah, we know that well-defined boundaries, as well as a buffer that we work on of where the site sensitive lands are. And that's why we're moving our infrastructure away from those areas.
Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you so much for this presentation. Two things. I wanted to share how the park was. I used to get our cows from that park. Yes, Englishman Cervidaria was my family's, and I just find it amazing how this has been protected and then expanded. Not that I'm concerned, but I'm wondering about over expansion, because building and they will come is happening. I was an hour getting out of the park the other night to my home, which is very close by. And so I am concerned. On the other hand, it looks fabulous. I mean, I really appreciate the construction, but I'm just concerned about that. That's one concern. And the other thing, did you say it would be starting in the fall if we got this contract? So it will be finished before next spring? So is that true?
Through the
Yeah,
mayor.
thank you.
Yeah, through the mayor, if this is awarded, the construction would start relatively soon and would be completed before Christmas this year.
Really? Okay, thank you. I'm just putting there's just so much going on down there. It's just like, do you think it's overdone? I wonder.
Through the mayor, I mean, the decisions on what happens in the park is up to the community and mayor and council. It's a busy park. It's definitely busy. And I think as we plan for the future, we need to consider thresholds. And I think that's something that we're going to look at as far as planning going forward, is understanding capacity and how to do better on managing large events, managing capacity in general in the park, and what our facilities can handle.
Thank you.
Yes, and I can just comment on that to Councillor Martin, if I could. Anyways, part of the reason that we did Memorial Plaza was to take some of the strain off the community park for events, or even have simultaneous events whereby as Memorial Plaza could be utilized for a certain aspect of a celebration, and as well as the community park. But that was part of the reasoning that we did. Memorial Plaza went ahead for a lot of reasons, but that was one of the considerations, is to take some of that away from the community park. Our community park is well used. I guess it's a good thing. And I believe that this application for the new washrooms is sorely needed as to the success of this, the community park itself. Parksville's a destination. So, and here we are. So, yeah, thank you. Other questions are for Ms. Egan, Mary, Councillor Beal, and Mary.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through to Mr. Kidd. I have a couple of questions. First of all, regarding the raised crosswalks, and if you could go back to that photo, could you go back to another one too, where we get those dotted lines? There we are. So The pedestrian route that's showing towards that would link up to, through the Arboretum and onto the tennis pickleball courts. At that point, would that be a raised crosswalk? And would that also then make it accessible with anyone? That's fantastic. I actually received a call from a resident just this last week, very concerned that it's hard to get into the Arboretum area when she has to park down near there, and due to her condition, it's exhausting for her to have to go all the way back to the entrance close to the tennis court in order to get in to enjoy those treats. So it really is an ordeal for her. So that would be a real plus. My next question, if you're able to answer it, if we do in fact apply $600,000 from the Growing Communities Fund, what kind of money does that leave us in the Growing Communities Fund with what's been allocated so far? So what is the impact on that fund? And I thought that perhaps our Director of Finance might be able to tell us
That
that.
might bring out Jenna. Okay, sure.
Thank you, Jenna.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. So the Growing Communities Fund, if you recall, started at 4.789 million. And in the financial plan, there were two allocations from that amount, 750,000 for the comprehensive water study and 750,000 for the fire hall. And so if another 600,000 was allocated, that would leave about 2.7 million unallocated. What I will point out, though, is that if you recall, that 750,000 with the fire hall was to allow us to use the gas tax for the track. And now we've had some preliminary commitments from other municipalities on that. They're not final yet. So it may be that at the amended budget, we can actually kind of put some of that back in. So there may be a difference of some funding there, but just conservatively, we would have about 2.7 remaining if we were to allocate the 600,000.
Yes. Follow up, Councillor Bill.
Thank you very much. And yes, I was hoping that encouraging news that we got regarding the track and the contribution from the RDN, okay, perhaps not 100% confirmed, but it looks like $240,000 approximately would be coming towards the track. So I thought that would make this more palatable. Thank you. I do have another question for Mr. Gibbon.
Yes, great.
All right,
Thank
thank you.
For
For
Mr. Giddens?
Mr.
Or-
Gibbon,
okay,
yes.
yeah.
Okay.
And
Mr.
I was
Gibbon.
just curious with the drawings that you have there, I understand that now this proposed washroom, actually I have two questions. One, with the proposed washroom now needing to be elevated so as to not get into sensitive areas, what will that look like in terms of, I mean, obviously it needs to be a reasonable slope so that people can, have their workout getting up to it. But what would that look like in the area if you, okay, there we go.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. You can see it on the drawings. There's an extent of fill beside the pathways around the washroom building. So basically it'd be a mounded area that would be gently graded out. And a 1.4 meter rise in elevation for the final floor elevation seems high, but in reality, when we have the space to actually grade it, so we end up with under 8% grades for accessibility over a really small area. And then we actually get down to existing grade relatively quickly. So it's a mounded area. It'll be filled and gently sloped. It'll be barely noticeable.
Okay, thank you. And one follow-up. I'm just curious if, understanding how people use the park, I get the sense that there's the greatest uses around the playground areas, the beach, of course, getting down towards the gazebo, the walkway. This new washroom is going to be, somewhat removed from that area. Was there a discussion in the planning about the distance from the most intense use of the park? Like, I'm just wondering if people are all going to think like, oh, well, I need to use a washroom, I'll go here. Oh, it's busy. Oh, where is it? It's down at the other end. So I'm just wondering if there was some thought given to that, and if at the end of the day, it still felt that this is a reasonable spot, if you could speak to that.
Yeah. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, extensive thought. We looked at all avenues and locations, and again, we had to exclude a large portion of the park due to archaeological sensitivity. We looked at connectivity and movement to the largest parking lot in the largest vehicle area, not only the gravel lot, but the lot beside the curling club are two big areas for vehicles. And as we move forward in the development of the park and the evolution of the park, we're looking at wanting to reduce vehicles throughout the park and utilize our parking better. And with the large parking lot being located where it's at, washroom buildings are usually located beside parking areas. You arrive to a park, first stop is usually a washroom, and we already have a washroom building adjacent to our playground. So those are the two hotspots for washrooms are playgrounds and parking lots. So we looked at this location and ultimately it was evident that this was a very good location going forward as far as evolution. And again, people arriving at the park, commuting through this new area to the gathering plaza and out to the beach, it's a linear connection and relatively short walk. And we also looked at with the location of Kin Hut in triangulation. So it's rather almost equidistance between the three washrooms, and that's quite good for the park. And ultimately, in the end, I think travel to a washroom anywhere in the park is going to be under 3 minutes. So we think that's very, very good for park users.
Councillor Grenz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through to our manager of special projects. Thank you for the presentation. So speaking of location considerations, was consideration given around the curling club, and what is the future of the curling club? Is that a facility that could be multi-purpose and washrooms that exist there could be expanded or anything like that?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. The washroom facilities within the curling club are within their rental agreement. And we did discuss with them about opening them up for the public. However, that would require in the current condition would require an attendant all the time because of where they're located within their building. And they did that once. They were very not supportive because they did it once for an event in the past, which I believe was a car show or maybe something else. And the doors were left open and the inside was vandalized. So it's a really hard one to utilize those facilities as they are now. The future of the curling club is unknown. The current rental or operational agreement with the society that runs it is still active for many years. And until something else changes or a different direction, the building will remain in its current condition.
Just a little follow-up there, if I may. So I guess it feels strategic if there is a plan for the future of the curling club, if we're going to invest $1.5 million in a washroom facility, when maybe in a few years the curling club would be renovated or something like that, because I know it's nearing its end of life. Is there any opportunity to have a multi-phase project where washroom is the first component related to a future curling club or whatever facility may come there? Or I don't know how much planning has been put into that piece of this puzzle, which is the curling club. So I guess I just want to dig into that a little bit more. Not necessarily using the washrooms that are currently there, but perhaps if we're building washrooms across the parking lot from the curling club, does it make sense to have them as a future curling club washroom?
Right. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Consideration for the future of the curling club has been discussed, and it's not very definitive what would happen in the future for the curling club as far as rebuilding one, removing it, and how this would integrate into something like that. It's a pretty large planning process to consider something like that when the future of the facility of the curling club and the financial sort of commitment to go that route as far as building another curling club or new facility hasn't really been discussed. So it wasn't really wholesomely considered, but we did consider existing conditions.
Councillor Gore.
Thank you, Mayor. So there is a significant cost. Like I don't question the desperate need for the additional washroom facilities in the park. Kind of similar to Councillor Grenz asking about the curling rink. have we explored options of the Kin Hut being refurbished, or would it be cheaper? Or if we were to, let's say, go with option 2, cancel the washroom. Sorry. How would it change the timeline for the Gathering Plaza? What's the current timeline of completion? And adding this another $150,000 for the site improvement, how would that shift things?
Thank you. And through the mayor, first question regarding Kin Hut. The discussion for updating Kin Hut to meet accessibility and capacity, the challenge is we wouldn't be able to expand on the footprint because of the sensitive lands. So we would never be able to expand capacity, and we need to move to a higher capacity washroom. So it's very limiting Kin Hut. So what we have there is, as far as capacity, will basically remain. The second question was regarding, sorry.
Option 2 and
Oh,
the
option-
Gathering Plaza.
Thank you. Option 2 is if we added that to the scope for the Gathering Plaza as a change order by increasing the budget by $150,000, that would probably increase the timeline on the project by a month. It's not a lot of utilities or work like that. It needs to be done. It's more hardscape and softscape. So it would expand the project timeline, by a month.
What's the current completion date for the Gathering Plaza?
Current completion date is mid-September.
Any other questions for Mr. Giddens? I think that's it, Mr. Giddens. Thank you very
Thank
much
you.
for your report. And since you kindly read them all out for me, I'm not going to read them all out again. You have it there, council, it's on record. Do I have a mover and second for the recommendations? 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Do I have a mover and seconder? Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Wood. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor? That is approved by all those opposed. Opposed, let it be noted that Councillor Grenz and Councillor Gore oppose this motion. It passes. Councillor Martin, Councillor Wood, Councillor Beal, and Mayor O'Brien all voted in favor. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Doxey, Manager of Infrastructure, could you please give us a background on the issue regarding the Transportation Master Plan contract award? Award the contract for the Transportation Master Plan. Mr. Doxey.
If I may, through the mayor, the report is pretty basic. It is within budget, and the recommendations to approval are kind of as shown in the report. It may be of value, as some may have not undertaken or been part of a prior transportation master plan or similar study, to give you maybe a 30 second, 1 minute maybe overview of what we're doing here. Council sets major policies, they set bylaws, and they approve these and adopt major transportation, master plan type documents. And then there's typically, 4 or 5 years, maybe 10 years in between. Administration may be making changes due to requests for service, customer demands. They may be via delegations to council, and you sometimes end up with corridor changes, right-of-way control changes. And when those things happen, we don't have the resources of a full network of a consultant field that maybe has like $1 million of like salary and benefits, kind of working to that end. And so this is our opportunity to kind of circle back and make a baseline study that looks at the entire network, and it listens to the entire community, and it sets a long range, transportation plan for the network that listens to all those people and kind of sets some goals, understands the functional needs, so the varying modes that people want to use the roadway systems for, and understands the capacities and the expectations that people have towards that system. Quality is another kind of judgment measure that is used. That comes into play through things like the payment condition assessment and get captured in the asset management system. But the transportation master plan, like I say, it is our opportunity to kind of touch base with the people and circle some of those bases. And some of those things that we're going to be looking at are short, some medium, and some long-term projects. Some of the financial decisions that those would bring. We're looking to integrate some of the adjacent land use plans and growth changes. So things like when we hear widen the community plan for the amount of traffic that was going to come with these developments. These are those opportunities when they actually do happen and they're undertaken and they're modeled for those distinct purposes. So we're looking to define some of any future roads that might be needed in, say, on any undeveloped areas for transit goods, active mobility, through engagement and through some modeling analysis. So that's one area that's probably a little bit different in our transportation master plan than what you might be seeing from the prior one or ones. And even in evaluating if you're following any kind of other communities' transportation master plans, a lot of times they're philosophical documents on options and things that can happen. And we're really looking at this study with a bit of a lens of kind of sustainability. We want to have some modeled, quantifiable, analytical tools that we can look back and report to the community as to how we're actually doing and are our roads meeting the objectives. So when something comes back to administration or it comes back to council, we've got some tools in hand that we can say, how our system is doing. So that's kind of a key area, I think, that we want to see our plans set out. Otherwise, some of the key scope items there that we're going to be looking at are reviewing the downtown parking study with some recommendations to improve some of the shortfalls, just reviewing and looking at what's currently happening downtown, what's changed since that study was done, and then there's some industry evolutions and changes since that was looked at many years ago. Prioritizing some active and sustainable mobility with some specific initiatives along with some financial implications. And then one of the other kind of large items that we want to look at is our 19A corridor through the downtown. There's been a lot of conversations back and forth on prioritization of vehicle, maintaining this as a highway. But then also understanding that it's a downtown, very tight business community. There's a residential community, depending on how you say it, community in the downtown. And then there's a visitor community. And we need to make sure that downtown corridor has a good balance of prioritizing those movements of people and vehicles through that corridor. So a road diet conversation is a part of this study. There'll be 3 rounds of public communication through it. So kind of how are we doing? Where are we at now? What are the shortfalls? What are your wishes and needs and wants? The second phase will be kind of where do we want to go? Like what do we need? Kind of more on that end as opposed to what we have right now. And then the third will be kind of our plans and reporting back out to like what are we going to do and how are we going to get there and the path forward. So anyway, that's kind of the Coles notes, really stripped down. But otherwise, the report itself is fairly basic. It is within budget. We did tender publicly. We got 8 compliant proposals, which is a high number of proposals to have parsed through, and they were all very good. And otherwise, like I say, the recommendations are per the report. If there's any questions, I can help.
Thank you, Mr. Doxy. And this is really exciting because this checks off a portion of one of our boxes, to increase the vibrancy of our downtown. And so to jump on this so quickly, I applaud you for that. I'm very interested to see this award or see this plan go through. I'm also very pleased that there's a large amount of public participation that you mentioned anyways, public input and so forth, that will be included in this. The only question I have is a transportation master plan. Does it reflect an active transportation component as to the influx of e-bikes and so forth? Is it going to be looking at that as well?
If I may, back to the mayor. Yes. So active transportation was a big part of a lot of the proposals. We're shy of branding it as an active transportation study just because when the last study was done, active transportation was basically bicycles. And now recognizing we have an older demographic, we have accessibility, people with accessibility issues. but we have growing use of e-bikes, bikes, e-scooters, scooters. There is a new type of device every day. It seems like that's being put out on the streets, and we're in, cahoots or conversations with ICBC, the RCMP, in terms of like how to regulate who can run what, where, and how. And so we kind of want to take a bit of a broader lens to that active transportation model, but to make sure it's inclusive of everybody that should be, using the streets in a safe way. So.
That's good. Thank you. And with the increased development we have going on in Parksville and the increased population, it's very timely, and I appreciate that. Just one other question before I move on, is there a completion date put forth for this plan?
The completion date is targeted at the end of the first quarter, so beginning of April 2024.
Thank you so much. Other questions from council? Yes, Councillor Gordon.
Thank you, Mayor. And through you to, Mr. Doxey. I was happy to see that the applicant has a working relationship here, and they have a knowledge of our community and the demographics. One thing that I heard quite often, I still do, is the traffic calming in the neighborhoods. I personally do like lower speeds in certain municipalities like Tawasin, and where they have about 30-35 kilometers per hour zones. So would this be something of consideration? Because this has been raised by our seniors, by people with disabilities, and young families with children. They want those streets to be safe for everybody. So if you could speak to that, please.
If I may, through you, Mayor. Yes, it would be something that would be potential for discussion on the table. Having moved here from the prairies, it's not uncommon to see urban speed limits in the 40 range and tight, narrow cross sections. That has to be balanced with RCMP abilities to enforce. And then, of course, back to our demographic inability to navigate vehicles and fire department. And we have some of, our own operational forces that do operate large pieces of equipment in our city. So it'll be a balance, but I am expecting, I think with Victoria or Saanich, one of those communities implementing or looking at implementing a 30 or 40 kph limit, that it will be coming forward for the conversation.
Thank you. Follow up.
Thank you, Mayor. So would you be also working with the accessibility committee on this? Because they will probably have some recommendations as well. And since being on the committee, I know they are quite concerned about some of the sidewalks and crosswalks or lack thereof in the city roads. Thank you.
If I may, through the mayor, I think the short answer is yes. I think we need to think of the accessibility and handicapped folks as part of active transportation in these days. And the timelines for the study, they work very well with it wrapping up in the first quarter of 24, with the accessibility committee needing to have, if I'm understanding correctly, they need to have a plan in place. I want to say it's September of this year. And so we should be able to have a little bit of an iteration where we kind of feed each other some information back and forth. And then there's also some benefits and some time, some timeliness with the pavement condition assessment, in that program is going to be picking up traffic control, right-of-way signage, and lane markings. And so we'll have the use of a lot of information to go into the modeling. So.
Thank you, Mr. Doxey. Councillor Wood, Councillor Grant.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you to our Manager of Infrastructure. Thank you for your presentation. Very much looking forward to this coming to fruition. The engagement aspect of this, I just want to make a comment that I think every opportunity to engage is also an opportunity to educate. And so I'm hopeful that the engagement aspect will do some background on why we are where we are today as a city, how we compare to other similar municipalities. I've heard some concerns from the community around sort of the state of the roads in Parksville. So maybe an opportunity to educate where, why decisions are made, whether there's a sidewalk here or not here, to educate the public on some of these things, that we're all working from the same information when it comes to the engagement aspect. That's my comment and suggestion.
If I may, through your worship, I don't know if I'm supposed to respond, but yes, that is 100%. I think it's in our radar as well, that we need to communicate those things better than maybe historically has been practiced. So.
Councillor Beal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through to Mr. Doxey. Thank you very much for the report. I do have a couple of questions. One is that while I realize that or recognize that traditionally, at least, the transportation master plan is going to focus on roads and the road network and how that works, and hopefully for everyone who's using the roads. But is there also, does it also include connections to pedestrian routes or parks where that might not actually be a road? Like, I just realized that there could be some gray areas. I mean, we've got parks that you look at parks, and then, so would those connections also be looked at? In the Jensen Greenway is certainly an easy example right here. It's not actually a park, it's not a road, but it's certainly part of a transportation network. So I just wondered if you could speak to that. And then I do have another question.
If I may, again, through your mayor, short answer is yes, absolutely. We're looking at all of those as part of the transportation network. Jensen Greenway would certainly be part of it. There is a walkway between behind Hearst, I guess, west of Hearst, not west of Hearst, I apologize. Mollett. It's west of Mollett, and it runs north of Hearst, and it drops at Hearst, I believe, and then there's a right of way there, and it's a potential corridor, but there's a lot of questions, concerns, conversations that need to be had about its feasibility, another corridor, SEPTED issues, crime prevention through environmental design, and how to make that work and make it work right, because there were some concerns that have been raised over the last number of years, but certainly some of those non-traditional highway mechanisms are within our scope.
Thank you. And yes, I'm aware there's one behind Mollett that actually goes down to Harnish, but also then beyond that, beyond Chestnut. And that actually, you can go all the way through to Morrison. Like, it's just, you can actually make quite a nice circle route around the town. Another more of a comment and observation, and I dearly love the topic of active transportation, and including also people who are on foot, so whether you're on wheels or on foot, or how you're going about, or taking the bus. And I think transit needs to be, I hope, would be a part of this. But I did note that there was noted that the investment in recreation amenities, no perceived impact. And I'm afraid I take a little bit of issue with that, because I do feel that our roads are a huge part of public asset and in fact, public land. We have a lot of land there. And I guess I'm thinking as much about the recreational value, but also the social value. And roads are what connect you, neighbors within neighborhoods. We go out and we meet on the street when we're taking out our refuse or whatever we're doing, but also people walking their dogs, cycling along, and are these not part of recreational activities? So I realize that people might be thinking solely of a particular sport and the like, but cycling, running, dog walking, going along the street, I see those as activities to celebrate, and that they bring together both recreation, physical activity, and social interaction. So I think that all those boxes, all those categories could be ticked with this particular study. If you have any comments, I'd love to hear them.
If I may, through your mayor, you're absolutely right. It's probably kind of back to Councillor Grenz's comments about public engagement, and it's probably an area where we need to we can better communicate those things. I think at the front end of the study, we're not quite clear on just the mechanisms and the values added at this point in time. But I think philosophically, you're definitely correct. We struggled when we were writing the report to, if we can't put a number on it, we were shy.
Fair enough. Thank you. All councillors satisfied? Great, thank you. Do I have a mover and a seconder for the recommendation? Point one, that the report from the manager of infrastructure dated June 29th, 2023 entitled Transportation Master Plan Request for Proposal Award be received. Point two, that staff award the work for a transportation master plan in the amount of $149,810 plus GST to McElhenney Limited. And point three, that the mayor and corporate officer execute the contract with McElhenney Limited. A mover and a seconder for that, moved by Councillor Gore, seconded by Councillor Martin. Any further discussion? All those in favor? That carries unanimous. Thank you, Mr. Doxson. Council, moving along now, we're point 4 of the agenda here. We have our bylaws. A first reading would be for zoning and development amendment bylaw 2023 number 200.146, which is a text amendment to downtown commercial C3 at 187 Bagshaw Street. Do I have a mover and a seconder for the recommendation that zoning and development amendment bylaw 20.23 number 2000.146 be read a first time? Mover and seconder, please. Moved by Councillor Wood, seconded by Councillor Grems. All those in favor, or any further discussion? All those in favor? That carries unanimous. Thank you. The next one is the second reading and advance to public hearing for zoning and development amendment bylaw 2023 number 200.144. Map and text amendment to tourist commercial CS2 at 1170 Resort Drive. Do I have a mover and seconder for the recommendation? That point 1, that zoning and development amendment bylaw 20.23 number 200.144 be read a second time. That's point 2 is that zoning and development amendment bylaw 2023 number 200.144 be advanced to a public hearing to be held Wednesday, September 6, 2023, starting at 1 p.m. in the forum at the Parksville Civic and Technology Center, located at 100 Jensen Avenue East, Parksville, BC. Got a mover or a seconder for that, please? Moved by Councillor Wood, seconded by Councillor Beal. Any discussion? Councillor Go.
Thank you, Mayor. So I'll be voting against it just because of lack of staff housing that I mentioned previously. And I'm not satisfied with the amenities contribution that's being proposed. Thank you.
Any further discussion? I'll be voting in favor of this because it checks off all the boxes for me and all the questions were answered to my satisfaction. So I will support this motion. All those in favor? All those in favor and also those opposed? Councillor Gore votes opposed. All the rest are in favor. Thank you. Bylaws, third reading for Plan Parksville Amendment Bylaw 2022, number 1492.7. Map and text amendment to mixed use neighborhood commercial at 285 Despard Avenue West. Do I have a mover or seconder for the recommendation that Plan Parksville Amendment Bylaw 2022, number 1492.7 be read a third time? Moved by Councillor Wood, seconded by Councillor Grems. Any discussion? Councillor Beal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just wondering, is it possible to ask a question of our Director of Planning at this time, just to clarify something about this?
The Director of Planning is here. Yes, Blaine is still here. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I think that would be in line, of course, part of your,
I'm sorry, I didn't get a chance.
part of
to-
your discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and
Okay.
thank you, Mr. Russell.
Yes. Go ahead, Councillor Beal, do you have a question? to
Yes,
Ms.
I
Russell?
just wondered if you could clarify something for me. This, if this goes ahead, is it possible that the end result, that the end plan for this property might look different than what was presented? Either in, shape or even number of buildings? Is it possible that it might be different? It will need to come back to us, I presume, for a development permit. Could you just clarify that for me?
I may, Mayor, through to Councillor Beal. So what you've seen is a proof of concept. It's not necessarily what may actually be built exactly like that. A separate development permit is required where council would vet the specific details and design of the building. And it could be a little bit different than a concept plan.
Is it possible that, are there limits, so if this gets passed, are there limits to, let's say, a height request that there's some limits that would be in place, but is it possible that a different height, for instance, might be requested in the form of, let's say, a variance or something like that?
If I may, Mayor, through to Councillor Beal. So any zone in the city, existing or future zone, someone could apply to vary some parameters of the zone. But there is a public process for that, and it ultimately requires a separate council decision. Things that can't be varied are density. So that's the number of units per hectare, the floor area ratio or the parcel coverage. So those things can't be varied. Those things require separate zoning, but some parameters can be varied. But as I mentioned, that there is a public process to that, a public input process with notice, and council ultimately has to make a decision.
I just want to thank you very, very much. That was my understanding, but I really appreciate it having it be clarified. Thank you again.
Thank you for that. Any further discussion? Councillor Gore.
Thank you, Mayor. So this is an OCP amendment from a neighborhood commercial designation to a mixed use, adding close to 150 more units in a quite busy part of our town already. The West End on the other side of Quality Foods has already seen a couple of OCP amendments itself. OCP is a strategic priority. We heard it from the public. They value their input, what they gave to us 10 years ago, and now it's also our strategic priority to have that revised and have public input. I am against this proposal because I think, yes, there's a need for housing and rentals for 20 years. Proposal is not adequate for me. But I think the focus also needs to be on the quality of life of people. I think there are options within the neighborhood commercial that should be explored. Property just north of it is already zoned for 47 multifamily units. So I think it's just going to create a lot more housing density that will negatively impact the neighborhood. There will be concerns definitely about parking, traffic. My biggest concern is going into the community. This will not be a small town feel. That's what we heard all the time from the people in the OCP. And this is just not a word to be thrown around. If we are amending the OCP on a piecemeal basis, it's just taking away the essence of what a small town would look like. So I am going to vote against the OCP amendment on this file. Thank you.
Your hand up. Okay. Oh, your pen is up. Yeah, Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to comment on this, when I go past those units at that end of town, what I love to see, I think it was last week, I saw a couple of tiny little kids. Maybe they were 3 or 4, and they're on their deck with their mom or something. And to me, when we have single family residential that is unattainable for many families, these rental units are attainable. And I love to see families moving into Parksville because I think that's a more sustainable future for us. And so I will definitely be supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Grant.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you to council. So I too will be supporting this because we have before us the choice of having a property that's developed for commercial only, or having a property that's developed for commercial as well as residential rental units. I know there's been criticism around the 20 years. I don't know what the number would be that would satisfy the criticism of how many years of rental covenant would be crossing the threshold to make that be a suitable compromise. We had last meeting, a development permit came before us for a number of patio homes. And I found there was no one in the audience that stepped up to the microphone to voice their concerns around that proposal. Yet there were concerns around rental units. So I think we need to have a mixture of housing in our community. This does deliver some of the housing, as Councillor Wood spoke to, that will make it possible for workers to live in our community. I'm now a liaison to the Parksville Qualicum Beach Tourism Association, and this is a constant concern that there is not enough housing in our community for workers that work in our restaurants and in our seniors facilities. We need more worker housing, and rental housing in this location allows us to do that. In my opinion, in an efficient way as well, in terms of ensuring that we have good use of the land for limited available land by having this level of density. And I might add that it has underground parking, which is a feature that I very much appreciate, and that it will create a vibrant feed into our goal of having a vibrant downtown, because this is now part of that. Sort of, it's not officially part of downtown, but very, very close to downtown. And our goal for that. I look forward to getting to the development permit stage, where we'll have an opportunity to really discuss how to make sure that this enhances the community village appeal by allowing people to live, work, and play close to home. So I will be supporting this proposal.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know people that live in the adjacent condos, and I've talked to them before I was elected, and I've talked to them since. And I will be speaking to them closely. I have 3 different contacts in there. One with a 3-bedroom is just thrilled that they've got a 3-bedroom. In their case, they got in when it was built, and so their rent isn't that high. And they have 2 adult children living with them still, because they have no place to live. And so that's exactly what's going on. Another couple I know, it's more affordable for them. They're seniors, they can't afford much, and they're happy there. And another gal there who's a single gal, and she's happy there. So I will be talking to them as this comes forward, but I'm very much supportive of this and the design and everything, like the other councillors have mentioned. But thank you very much, and I feel it's something I will vote for. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Project.
Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mayor. I was just thinking, for myself, if I was going to vote against a new business that is going to open up in Parksville, and one of the reasons I was going to vote against it was a lack of staff housing. And then I don't know what other staff housing would be besides long-term rentals, because obviously purchasing a residence is very expensive with the down payment and everything else. So I find that long-term rentals really checks that box of workforce housing. Besides it being subsidized elsewhere, market long-term rentals is a great way for staff to move into the area and work at new businesses. Thank you.
Thank you. I will be voting in favor of this proposal for the fact that I believe that this actually increases the diversification of our community, and actually increases the enhancement and makes it more of a small town feel when we introduce families and workforce housing into the area, because that is very important to us. And also just hearing from Mr. Doxey's report recently about traffic calming and traffic slowdown, which is also the strategic plan to create that small town feel. And so I believe that it's very important that we do that. And having families in the neighborhood is very important to me, and to also address the serious lack of options for apartment style housing. So I'll totally be supporting this. Thank you. One more go.
Thank you, Mayor. So it's not that if I am voting against that, I'm against young families moving or not giving them enough options to rent. We do have a lot of development permits in the works. We already have properties that are zoned for specifically for this, and more applications will come before the council. What I am against is we are amending the OCP to somehow stimulate more growth than we are already seeing. So that's what I am against. I'm against the single focus on providing housing. I think the focus of the council needs to be back on the quality of life of current residents as well as the future residents who call Parksville home. So that's why I'm going to vote against the even higher density in that node of our city. It's not really connected to our downtown. It's like a mesh of separated from downtown. Just a couple of blocks down, we have the Jensen block with another high density housing. We already are seeing growth. I don't personally think we need to amend the OCP to stimulate further growth. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And I would comment that I think that it's the perfect spot to have the density increased in this area because it's right across from Springwood Park. It's right across from Springwood School. It's right across from the Oceanside Health Center. It's right across a new development that the Quality Foods development there, that is groceries. And so it could actually alleviate a lot less use of cars to get to services. And if we can get more cars off the road, that's a win in my situation. So I really think it could be a very attractive neighborhood to move into. So let's call the question. All those in favor? All those opposed? That would be all those in favor, except for Councillor Gore, who's voted in opposition to this. Thank you, Mr. Russell. Next one is bylaw for third reading, the zoning and development amendment bylaw 2022, number 200142. The map and text amendment to comprehensive development CD 34 at 285 Despard Avenue West. Do I have a mover and seconder for the recommendation? That zoning and development amendment bylaw number 2022, number 200.142 be read a third time. Moved by Councillor Wood, seconded by Councillor Martin. Any discussion? All those in favor? All those opposed? That is everyone in favor except for Councillor Goer has voted in opposition. Thank you. That carries. Notice of motion. There is a motion on the agenda today for consideration that I'm putting forward. It's for the overnight accommodation at Memorial Avenue Plaza. This motion has been placed on the agenda in lieu of notice, so the council may vote on it at the July 5th regular meeting. That the recommendation that staff be directed to immediately commence the statutory process to amend City of Parksville Parks and Public Open Spaces Bylaw 2016 number 1523 to define the Memorial Avenue Plaza from the intersection of McMillan Street to the edge of Alberni Highway, and add this as a defined area to the sensitive area designation where temporary shelter and overnight accommodation are not permitted. Do I have a seconder for the recommendation? Councillor Wood, second the recommendation. I'll speak to that to just clarify a little more. We already have in our public and open spaces bylaw the designation of certain areas in the city of Parksville whereby overnight camping is not permitted and so forth. It's defined as a sensitive area designation. And what this would do would be prevent overnight camping, people causing obstruction, and people using the the Memorial Avenue Plaza in a not a choosing my words here. So that they treat it so that here we go. So, I'm trying to be nice here, polite. So what it is to prevent people from using it, the Memorial Plaza for a designated area that it was not intended use. So that is what it's all about. And it just makes it so that we can, these people, if they choose to use it for that area, they will be moved on to a different area. That is the reason for it. And so I was going to ask Councillor Wood if he wanted to talk any more. Since he seconded, I'll open it to anyone else. Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Martin.
If this is passed, would these people be having another area where they could be sent? Because as you know, it just goes from one place to the other. So I just wondered if you had anything in mind. That's all. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
What this does is actually ask the people to leave the area where they're at. Because what the activity they're doing in that area is not sensitive to that area. It doesn't define an area where they're going to. They're a member of the public. They can go to other public areas as they choose, just like you or I. It doesn't define where they can go to, but it certainly defines what is appropriate at that site. Go ahead, Councilor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On my way over here today, I dropped by the Memorial Plaza. I wanted to see just for myself, different times of day, what's going on, because I do drive by there, but I don't walk around there. I met one of our constituents. She lives here. And she's concerned, obviously. She was looking at what's going on. She had her own dog. She was going for a walk just on the street. And she said, is there a place where these people could be sent, or allowed to go or suggested or anything like that? Because she did ask, because she's concerned, like, it's been in the news. We've seen it, all of us. It's a public forum here. On the east side of Vancouver, they got downtown Vancouver, they took down those people from the streets there. And they just were taken down, and then they were back there within a while. So they didn't have a place to go. That was sort of like what she was referring to. So I'm just asking, is there a suggested place they might go so they don't go back to the Greenway pathway or, Jensen Greenway?
Sure, we're not talking about a camp, a camp busting here, like a camp encampment. We're not talking that. This is not the situation. You've seen the situation, what's happening on Memorial. I'm sure you got the same emails, you got the phone calls. And if you haven't got them, then you haven't been paying attention. Because the thing is that it's huge. The PDBA has announced it in a huge way that it's affecting business. I get 3 to 4 phone calls every day on what's happening there, about businesses, about people, assaults, and all the rest of it. The people are fed up and they're frustrated. And this is an incredible place that we've put up for. It's a gathering place for social activities. It creates a small town feel. And the people are very frustrated. We had a lady here, Mary, her name was, she's 90 something years old. And she told us that we gotta clean up this city. She's 90 years old and she felt afraid to walk down that plaza. So this is one small measure that we can do to create it so that they don't. Can we create other situations where they can go to? Well, you've all seen the proposal. There's a proposal on the table that's been sent to the province now, Red House, Blue House. Look at it. That would provide housing for those individuals. That may happen. It's not going to happen this year. It's going to be a long process if it goes through. So that is a possibility. No one else, federally or provincially, has advised us where these people can go to. They say that, the encampments are necessary because of the Supreme Court ruling. If you do not have housing, you're allowed to camp in public areas. And so they also said that you can create sensitive areas that is not suitable for that, where you might be obstructing the rest of the public. So the Supreme Court was good enough to suggest that that was, okay. So we're saying that you can't camp in other public areas. We're saying that you can't congregate because you're a citizen of Canada. All that we're trying to do is just make sure that they're not obstructing the use of other people of our community or affecting businesses in the area and so on. Yes.
I'm not, Mr. Mayor, I'm just not, I'm supportive of this. I mean, I'm not saying it's bad. I just wanted to have these constituents, their questions answered, that's all. And I believe something has to be done for sure. And this is motion, I would support this. I also have another notice of motion today that's not on the agenda that I'll be bringing up after we finish the discussion.
Sure, let's just talk about this one first.
Exactly.
Yes,
Exactly. Okay.
exactly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councilor Martin. Councilor Beal.
Mr. Mayor, and yes, I fully understand the concern here. There's been a lot of vandalism and issues of security, which really can't continue. And I will be supporting this. Like Councillor Martin, though, I certainly was very concerned thinking about, okay, well, what is this going to lead to? People, I believe that our CAO in a previous meeting also mentioned that what ends up happening then is people just get shifted to another spot, to another area. I had entertained briefly the notion, the question, could we provide some sort of something, porta potties or something, so in another area. But I realized thinking that all the way through and talking with others that that's not really workable either for a number of reasons. I was actually quite, though, I do think what is encouraging is our delegation that we had here earlier from the Oceanside Task Force on Homelessness and the presentation that they made, and hearing about the positive results with that setup in Duncan, and also how quickly it could be put together if we worked hard to, put our minds to it and work to identify some land that could be used. I think that something like that, I do hope that something like that is something that we can look at to alleviate the situation, to mitigate it greatly so that people are not just stuck on the street with all of their belongings and with no sanitary facilities and the like. So I absolutely support this. I do recognize, as I say, that there's been some serious vandalism and security in the area, and that really shouldn't continue.
Thank you, Councillor Beal. Councillor Gord.
Thank you, Mayor. There has been a lot of concern what's been going on at Memorial Plaza. We've all been getting emails, like you mentioned. We have a PDBA representative as well. I totally see, we're getting emails from businesses, we're getting emails from the public. But I do want to talk about the little bit of a mindset, the way we've been addressing this issue in Parksville. At the Jensen block where we have the buildings now, used to be a city-owned land and people would camp there. The way we addressed that issue was sell off the land and let's build there. So they moved. Then we had the forests on either end of town. People were camping there. Our solution was let's cut down the trees so they will have nowhere else to go and camp. It stopped, kind of worked. Where did they all end up? They ended up in our community park. They ended up in our ATM machines on the sidewalks. I understand the need, almost like a tunnel vision here. We need to clean up the Memorial Plaza. What will this lead to? We need to be prepared. We need to be cognizant of where the next move of these unhoused folks will be. And would that again lead into another precarious situation of what do we do? Going back to Councillor Beal talking about the tiny homes, I think as a council and as a society, we need to realize providing the opportunities for housing, treatment is something we need to take on so we can actually do some tangible difference in this regard. So I do support your motion, but at the same time, I really hope the council is cognizant of the future plan, that this is not the solution. This is just moving it forward away from Memorial Plaza to perhaps, let's say, down the road to Macmillan Arts Center, and they will probably be before the council in a couple of council meetings. Sorry, complaining about the same issue.
Councillor Grants.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you to council. So I'm very cognizant of how sensitive of a matter this is, and we as a council spend a lot of our time thinking about, talking about, learning about this challenge that we have across North America. We have at this table very few tools at our disposal to address the underlying problems. There is certainly an aspect of this which relates to the affordability of housing. And on that piece of it, we can control the amount of housing that's out there in our community. And by having more rental housing available, it creates more supply that then can bring down the prices, hopefully, or at least slow down the growth in rental prices, but that's just one small piece of this. There's a mental health aspect, which we have no control over here at the municipal level. There is a treatment aspect, which we do have before us in this council with a treatment center being proposed. So there's only so much we can do here. We had in this very room a week ago, a meeting with Town Hall with the Downtown Business Association hosted. The mayor spoke at that, as well as our MLA and MP and the staff sergeant from the RCMP. I was able to attend, as was Councillor Wood. And I am very sympathetic to the concerns of the people in the community who are just trying to run their business. And we've got a tourism industry, and for them to have to clean up human feces or deal with constant break-ins is not fair to them either. So I'm willing to give this motion a shot. But I do want the community to understand that we spend a lot of time on this issue. It's not really in our jurisdiction per se, but we are very concerned about it and doing what we can to try to help the challenge and the underlying issues as much as we can. And that includes working with our senior partners and other agencies and looking at other potential solutions in our community and beyond. So I will support this motion and hope that this fits into a larger puzzle of solutions.
Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll start by thanking all the councillors around the table for their thoughts. This is not a small issue. Just like Councillor Grenz was saying, I think about this all the time, and I'm going to support this, Band-Aid is what I'm going to call it. I'll support this. And I start to sound like a broken record, especially in my head. But the city of Parksville does not have a ministry of poverty reduction. We do not have a ministry of mental health and addictions. And I would urge the province, if they watch this meeting, I would urge them to bring council's solutions that we can vote on, because this is way out of our lane. And municipalities across the entire province and country are dealing with these things. And I, from the emails that I read, it is out of an abundance of compassion that we care for these people, while at the same time we are juggling having businesses have a bit of a friendly atmosphere to enter a business and spend money there. And that is how the entire economy works, is with businesses. That is how those ministries are supported. And I welcome solutions from the province, whose purview this is, to come and bring municipalities solutions that is way beyond our capabilities. And we will continue to do these Band-Aids. And we won't feel great about doing these Band-Aids, but we will listen to the business community and listen to the neighborhoods that elected us. So thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Are all those in favor? That carries unanimous. Thank you, council. Are there any other notices of motion?
Yes, there is, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Martin.
Thank you. I would like to sort of hitchhike on what the delegation from the Homelessness Task Force gave this afternoon by Violet Hayes. What I'm suggesting is to bring forward to council on July 17th to have asked for land search from our staff. And so what it is, how that formality is, it will have to come through with a complete motion, I understand. But this is what I'm asking today, because we need to do something. We've talked about this and we spend a lot of time at this. And so in order for that to happen, and we have to, it's time sensitive, because I mean, Ms. Hayes mentioned it. She's seen it done in 3 months. She's got her research. She's very qualified. Agency, both Suzanne and Violet are, and I'm asking our council then to at least direct staff to do a search for land. And that's the ask in my motion, notice of motion.
Thank you, Councillor Wood. So I hear what you're saying, and I would suggest that you work with our CAO to work on your wording to the intent, exactly what you just said, and to wordsmith it. And you providing notice, so that will be on the July 17th meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have an appointment to do this already with our CAO coming up. Thank you.
Thank you. Now the easy part, liaison reports. Oh, look at this, Councillor Wood. Would you like to provide an RDN update at this time?
Thank you, Mayor. Just looking at the time, I'm going to pass and I'll just carry it on to maybe another meeting where we have a bit more time to talk about it. Thank you.
As you wish. Thank you, Councillor Gore.
Thank you, Mayor. So it's an update from the Accessibility Advisory Committee. We met on the 26th of June. There's an accessibility survey is online now until first week of August. It's to help the city create an accessibility plan. It's also, the link is available on Let's Talk Parksville, and there are also paper copies available at the city's admin office. There was some coverage online on PQB News and through our Director of Communications that was shared as well. So I encourage everyone who faces disability or barriers, or somebody that you care for who has a disability, to complete the survey. And this is for people who face accessibility issues while using city facilities, programs, and services. So yeah, please go to the website and fill out the survey. Thank you.
Thank you for your report. Councillor Beal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I would like to speak about the Oceanside Community Arts Center. I recently had the pleasure and the privilege to attend, first of all, a reception along with Councillor Gore also attended, but then the opening of the Mosaics exhibit, which is an exhibit of mosaics. But this is a national conference. This is the 4th national conference that's been held in Canada. So we are in the company of cities like Montreal, Edmonton, and Hamilton. So it's really quite a feather in our cap, as it were, that the small city of Parksville was chosen to host this 4th conference. And it is truly an amazing exhibit. The theme is transitions, and I encourage everyone who can to stop by the MAC, that's the McMillan Arts Center on McMillan, oddly enough, to check out the exhibit. It's on until the end of August. It is amazing what these artists have done with the medium and with the theme. So that's one thing. I would also like to speak very briefly about the Mid-Island Radio Association. They recently had a field day, and this is the Ham Radio Association, and I attended that down in the community park. This is something that's held internationally, so that all the radio operators are out there in whatever community they're in, trying to make contact with as many as possible. And the radio operators, they play such a critical part in our emergency management operations, and also with emergency services. So I had a chance to meet with a number of them, and each one of them seemed to have a particular specialty that they were sharing. I got to have a look at the emergency management office operations trailer, and also the emergency social services trailer. And it was a fascinating time. And they also had actually very good burgers and hot dogs on hand, which I wasn't expecting. So that was a bonus. And I would also like a final shout out, though, to Katie Pocock. I hope that's pronounced correctly, but she is in charge of our emergency management operation. And each one of these gentlemen there just raved about how wonderful she is, how helpful she is, and getting them all organized and doing a great job. So I'd just like to send a shout out to her. She wasn't there, but each of them, as I went around, they didn't know the others had said that, but they said, "Oh, you're from the city. Oh, Katie is so fantastic." So I share that as well. It was a great event.
Thank you, Councillor Beal. Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Actually, I have 3 reports, and I'll make it really quick. So
Go
I know
ahead.
you like to we have a long meeting today.
The floor
so-
is yours. Councilor
The Oceanside Homelessness Task Force. It's just further to hitchhike on that. I just don't want to mention this. We had the community housing forum, and we received a report just the other day, taken from that community housing report in June, a forum in June. Notes were taken at the meeting by Belena's students, which resulted in an 8-page report we just received. Our next meeting will be in the fall with a roundtable, including community support groups, which will be giving us more input as to what's needed. And I will give a summary of those reports if you're interested, but it's probably not enough time on a liaison report. So it's up to the council if they want to hear more. One clear message came from several people, including Michael Garland of the Lions Club. And I'm sure most of you know who he is. And he said it wasn't about housing, it was about the land. And he just said it's loud and clear. It's always been about the land for housing. So that was what he mentioned.
Council Martin, if I could just interrupt, could you actually, you mentioned there was a report put out by the students and so forth.
Yes, it's an 8-page report we all received here.
Could you share that with council, please? Yeah.
Well,
No,
at
no, no,
another
not,
time.
not now. If you could just forward an email.
I'll-
to-
I'll- I think everyone, didn't you all receive it? Okay, I will send it all to the council. That's,
Thank you.
yeah, because
Thank
it's
you.
extensive. It was an excellent
Perfect.
exercise, you know.
Carry on. Thank you.
So for the my liaison for the DPBA. I tried to avoid saying all the words and then I had trouble with the initials. It's hilarious. Anyway, it's getting late, I think. They're looking forward to having the extra parking for staff at the community center. That is coming as soon as we can get the size down, and I know the staff is working on that because that will help them there's 20 slots there that they could maybe have their staff from the businesses put in there rather than on the street where then customers aren't able to come. So this will free up space for clients. A comment was made to myself from Teresa Cooper, who happens to be here as she's a new executive director. And she said, because she's observing being new and what's going on in the city and what everyone's doing. And she said, and I quote, "Everyone appears to be working together, and that's all good." And we're all working together, and it's taking a lot of effort and time, and so are they. So I thought that was a really good comment from Teresa. And the third liaison report I have here is for the Parksville Museum celebration 40 years. I did mention it last time. I just got a report from David Gogo, who's is tomorrow at the museum. This is for their music series for the 40-year anniversary. And the first one's tomorrow night. And there's tickets available still, but there's a very good turnout. There's, I think, over 100 tickets already sold. Gates open at 5 p.m. and close at 6 p.m. So you've got to come between 5 and 6 p.m. to get in. And the concert begins at 6:04 p.m. There will be an intermission for beer and pizza purchases with the event finishing at 8 p.m. There will be lots of chairs, but however, if you want to bring your own more comfortable chair, you're welcome to do that. And come early for a good spot. $25 at the door, cash or card. So that's on tomorrow night. Other events at the museum is a family fun day on Sunday, July 16th. This is in addition to the music series. That's a Sunday during the day. The museum's open from 11 to 5, I believe. It might be 6, but it's 11 to 5. The next music series is, just so you make a note of it, because the tickets are being sold very quickly, is for Valdi on July 27th. And so I think that's everything. The museum's closed Tuesday and Wednesday, so they've extended their hours in the grounds, but you can go in the grounds, you just can't get in on Tuesday and Wednesday. We've got quite a crew there that's running the museum. So thank you, everybody. And that's it for my reports. Goes on and on.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Councilor Martin.
Yeah.
And I just comment on the museum's entertainment nights. My family and I will be at the David Gogo concert tomorrow. And what is also was pointed out to me that there's going to be pizza there. Pizza is going to be from Craig Street Pizza, the new pizza shop that's opened up. So he will be working on getting the pizza there. There's going to be beer and other liquid refreshments. And it's in a beautiful setting at the Parksville Museum in their courtyard, outdoor setting. I'm guessing pretty good authority. We're going to have nice weather. Bring your chairs, bring maybe an umbrella too, because it might be a little warm, and enjoy David Gogo because it's just an incredible opportunity. So I say to support the museum, I think this is a great endeavor. So thank you for your report. One last piece of business. Do I have a mover and seconder for adjournment? Enthusiastically by Councillor Wood. Almost as much by Councillor Gore. Almost. That is carried. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody. All those in favor? Yeah, didn't I do it? I did, yeah.